Chapter 327. There were many opportunities in the Colton star cluster, and the Mercenary Alliance's database was the most direct indicator. Han Xiao had the advantage of being familiar with the storyline, so he could pick the missions that he was familiar with. Becoming a freelance mercenary was a very good choice. He could earn money and come into contact with various organizations through missions. It was a free path to promotion. However, Han Xiao's plan did not stop there. What he was going to do next was the real focus. There was an option on the mercenary interface that said, build a mercenary group. Han Xiao clicked on it without hesitation. Do you want to build a mercenary group? As the name suggested, a mercenary group was a small team of mercenaries that could accept missions with a certain number of people. Furthermore, the mercenary group had a rating system, and the actions of the members would be recorded. Missions completed by individual members would also be counted into the mercenary group's rating. Similarly, if a member did something negative, it would also affect the mercenary group's credit rating. Han Zhao's mercenary resume was blank, and so was his mercenary group. The Sky Ring Army was a super-large mercenary group that accepted large-scale missions. Their business was very wide, and countless members contributed to them. They had a very high reputation. As long as they did not have a criminal record, anyone could build a mercenary group. One person could only build one mercenary group. Unless the original mercenary group disbanded, a new one could not be built. Please fill in the name of the mercenary group. After thinking about it, Han Xiao simply named it Black Star Mercenary. After confirming the creation, the interface changed from the personal interface to the mercenary group interface. Han Zhao's goal in building a mercenary group was this group of players. This was a group of ready-made coolies, no warriors. Being a mercenary was a dangerous profession, but the players could be revived and would not suffer any losses. This was a good opportunity to take advantage of the players' natural advantages. With such hardworking members, it would be much easier to develop. The players were the best help. Let the players join my mercenary group, and we can form a faction. Han Zhao's eyes were deep, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Building a faction was an extremely core part of his plan. He wanted to be on the same side as the players and tie the players to his war chariot. This would increase the cohesion of the players and greatly reduce the chances of the players leaving. This was the plan that Han Xiao came up with in advance. It was also a step forward in his relationship with the players, from a purely beneficial relationship to a higher level, and he had truly become one of them. Think about it. If he were to establish a mercenary group, the initial members would all be professional players. This in itself would be a gimmick that would attract the attention of many players. Then, he would use rewards to attract professional players to work hard. As the mercenary group grew stronger, they would think that it was his own work. It emphasized that the contribution of players could promote the growth of the faction. Players would feel that their struggle for the faction was meaningful, and they would view the faction's achievements as their own. From there, they would feel a sense of satisfaction, accomplishment, and belonging. Do not underestimate the sense of belonging. This kind of thing would become feelings after a long time of nurturing. The killing power of feelings to players was not just a little scary. It would cultivate fanatical loyalty. For most players, the game was for fun, adding in role-playing elements, allowing players to choose a faction and adhere to their ideals. This would bring a strong sense of immersion, and this kind of gameplay would attract players. Everyone had a burning passion in their heart. They had a vision of loyalty, and they had heroic fantasies of dying for a certain faction. However, in the so-called reality, these feelings were suppressed by rationality. In the game, there was a chance to release these feelings, and there were no consequences. What Han Xiao wanted to do was to draw out these feelings in the hearts of the players and attach them to himself. Han Xiao wanted to build his faction into the hope of the players, and Han Technician himself would lead the faction, perfectly blending into the players and becoming the leader in the hearts of the players. As the faction grew, Han Xiao would be able to obtain more benefits. He could obtain good things and use them as rewards to attract players to contribute to the faction. It would enter a virtuous cycle, and a large number of players would become his support. The mercenary group was the initial stage of the plan. Through Pork Bun Show, he would constantly make his presence known and entrench his position. When more players entered the galaxy in the future versions, as long as he raised his arm and shouted, there would definitely be players who would want to join him. Of course, this was only the theory. The actual operation was more complicated, and it would take a long time to take shape. However, once it was successful, it would become the brand of a generation of players, just like WoW's Alliance and Horde, which would last for a long time. This was Han Zhao's grand blueprint. You guys register as mercenaries and join my mercenary group. I will take care of you. Han Zhao's tone was full of temptation. Mad Blade did not hesitate and was the first to do so. He had always followed two principles. First, there would be meat to eat if he followed Han Zhao. Second, everything Han Zhao said was right. The players joined one after another, and Han Zhao watched with a smile on his face. It was like watching seeds being planted in the soil, taking root, and germinating was just around the corner. The screen quickly changed to a new interface. Black Star Mercenary Credibility, 10 size, 47 people grade C, 47 people missions completed, 0 active area, none experience, none founder. Black Star, Han Zhao creation date. Galaxy calendar, year 688, October 2 summary. Trainee mercenary group, small in size, average strength of members, no obvious advantages. A mercenary group was newly established and unknown. There were 3 criteria to judge a mercenary group: size, strength, and credibility. The first 2 were the screening criteria for matching missions, and credibility was equivalent to the level of the mercenary group. Only by completing missions could one accumulate credibility, which represented the reputation of the mercenary group. Many employers had requirements for the credibility of the mercenaries. If the credibility was too low, the employer could reject the mercenary who applied for the mission. Credibility was also equivalent to fame. Of course, the profile would not show a more abstract value like fame, but the reputation system on the interface had digitized the fame of the mercenary group, and only Han Zhao could see it directly. Li Gu and the Temple of God team were not present. They were the only ones who did not join, and Han Zhao was a little dissatisfied. At this time, a notification suddenly appeared on Han Zhao's interface. Faction creation. Black Star Mercenary Faction Management function activated. A new option appeared in the NPC template, Faction Management, right next to Dungeon Creation. Just as I thought, Han Zhao's eyes lit up, and he was pleasantly surprised. Ever since the Dungeon Creation function appeared, he had been thinking about what other functions were hidden in the NPC template. Faction was obviously a very common function, but he had not triggered it for a long time. Therefore, he guessed that he was attached to the darknet, but the boss was Bennett, so this function had not been activated. He was 80% sure that only when he created his own faction would the interface show feedback, and he guessed right. If the interface did not show any reaction, he had planned to use his love to create a faction. Now that he had the system management of the interface, it was very beneficial for his faction development plan. Han Zhao quickly entered the faction management interface to familiarize himself with the function. After a while, his eyes became more and more excited. One word could describe this function: do whatever you want. Chapter 328. The interface of faction management was the most complicated one among all the NPC templates. There were many options, and he could do all the functions of a normal faction, such as faction relationship, contribution points, and finally issue faction missions. However, there was a limit to these functions. The reward limit for an individual mission was determined by one's level, grade, faction relationship, and legendary points. However, the faction limit was an independent system with 6 factors. Faction reward limit: 92,000 leader level, LV 70, plus 56,000 officers. None NPC, -47 players, plus 20,000 to 2 renown, plus 4,000 legendary points. Leader 3, plus 15% allies or enemies. None. The faction limit was used to issue faction missions. 92,000 was the maximum limit for a single mission, and the daily limit was 20 times, which was much higher than the 5 times for an individual. Furthermore, officers' legendary points and renown would increase the daily limit. Currently, his renown was too low, so was not shown. However, as the leader, Han Zhao's 3 legendary points had increased by 6 times, which was equivalent to 2 times of 1 point. The daily limit was 26 times for now. 26 times meant that he could give 2,400,000 EXP to players in the same faction every day. However, if he split it evenly among more than 50 people, each person would only get 50,000 EXP per day, which was obviously not enough for players of this level. The limit mainly limits the scale and expansion speed. This is just the newly established limit, so there's still a lot of potential for growth. Han Xiao was very confident. He analyzed the points one by one. First, there was no need to talk about the leader level. The stronger he was, the higher the limit. Officers had to be NPCs, and if NPCs of different levels joined the faction, it would increase the limit. This made Han Xiao even more determined to get in touch with protagonists. The scale would count the players, and the increase would be similar to energy level. When a number of players reached a certain standard, the next limit would be increased. For example, the next limit would be a scale of 100 people. Fame was different. It was the same as the reputation system, but there was a small difference. The fame of a faction was the sum of the reputation in all regions. For example, the Garden Star system had 10 points of fame, and the Jellic Star cluster had 5 points. Adding up to 15 points, that was the sum of the faction's fame. Legendary points had a percentage increase to the limit, and the benefits were very high. Furthermore, it was not only the leader who had legendary points, which would also increase the limit. Therefore, the benefits of recruiting NPCs were very high. Finally, there was allies and enemies. This was a relationship between one's own camp and other camps. It was equivalent to diplomacy. Apart from faction quests, it could also manage the players' faction relationships, contribution points, and so on. Han Xiao was extremely satisfied with this function. A lot of data could be seen at a glance, and there were more ways to attract players through the interface. When Han Zhao's faction was created, the players also received a notification on the interface. You have joined Black Star Mercenary. Current relationship, cold, 0/300. The players were used to it. To them, it was normal for a faction notification to appear. A player's name appeared in Han Zhao's faction management list. His eyes flashed as he sent a notification to the player. You are part of the first batch of Black Star Mercenary members. Plus 300 contribution. Current relationship, neutral, 300/1000. There are such benefits? Our relationship is now neutral. The players were pleasantly surprised. They hurriedly looked at the faction interface. Faction relationships were also contribution points that could be used to exchange for rewards. They wanted to see what the Black Star Mercenary could exchange for. As soon as they entered the faction reward interface, a dazzling array of items appeared. Many of them were items that were sold in Han Zhao's own shop. He had transplanted them into the faction reward interface. Furthermore, he had also put in some good items that were not for sale. For example, the 2.5 Ranger required 1,500 contribution points. The small collapsible battery required 1,200 contribution points, and the first version of the Viper mechanical suit required 6,000 contribution points. These items were equivalent to drawing a pie in the sky. They had been used many times, but they were always effective. Good stuff. Godly equipment. The players were instantly excited. These items could not be bought. The first time they appeared in front of the players, the effect was very shocking. The mercenary group has just been established, Han Xiao said. Our credibility points are still very low. Only by increasing our credibility points can we accept missions with higher rewards. We are now partners. The future of the mercenary group depends on everyone's hard work. Then, he showed the players the size of the faction on the faction interface, indicating that the growth of the faction would increase the mission rewards. He did this to let the players understand that their own contributions could promote the growth of the faction, and it was closely related to the amount of rewards they would receive to increase the sense of immersion of the players. Such a series of punches made the players dizzy. Then, Han Xiao turned to look for Sunil's employment applications. For the sake of his subclass, he decided to be the first to accept Sunil's missions. Very soon, he found a few missions, but the recruitment requirements were at least 120 credibility points. 120 points? Han Xiao stroked his chin. If he had followed the normal route, he would have been able to accumulate 120 points by doing a few combat missions. However, he decided to do those missions that required at least 1 credibility point. Daily missions were safe and easy, but they were more time-consuming. However, the players were all ready-made, so it would be a waste not to use them. He immediately used the new function to write a faction mission for the players. Faction mission, credibility criteria, mission introduction. The Black Star mercenary has decided to accept a mission, but it does not meet the credibility criteria. You need to increase your credibility points. Note, this is the prerequisite mission for the first mission. Mission requirements. Accept the daily mission in the hub hall and achieve 120 credibility points for the Black Star mercenary. Reward: 45,000 EXP, 300 faction contribution points. Note, the top 3 credibility contribution points will receive additional rewards. The EXP is quite little, but the faction contribution points are quite good. Didn't you see? This is the prerequisite mission. After completing it, there will be combat missions. That's a lot of EXP. This is a group mission, right? It requires everyone to contribute 120 credibility points. Yo, the top 3 credibility contribution points will receive additional rewards. Everyone whispered to each other. Seeing the additional rewards, Madblade and Hao Tian were eager to try. They knew better than anyone else that Han Zhao's additional rewards would definitely be good stuff. The mission only required them to do daily missions in the hub, which would only give them at least 1 credibility point. They were all cleaning, logistics, and maintenance jobs. The good thing was that they would not leave Ubarely Hub. With more than 50 players working together, they would accumulate credibility points very quickly. Han Xiao was not worried at all. Furthermore, the mission itself would also give the players rewards. Together with the faction mission, this was a double reward. If the players joined his faction, there would be almost nothing but benefits, so there was no reason to reject it. With Han Zhao's approval, the players dispersed and went to accept the daily missions. With such a group of assistants, Han Xiao could do other things without wasting time on daily missions. He returned to the resting room and prepared to perfect his plan. A few hours later, Li Gu and the others returned to the resting room. They had been wandering outside for a few hours. Li Gu thought that since they were in the galaxy, they had to activate missions as soon as possible. There were so many people in the hub hall, so he thought that there would be many missions that he could activate. However, he realized that most of the people there were just passing travelers. When they expressed that they wanted to help, 80% of the people there would laugh at them for not going to the Mercenary Alliance. Although they did not receive any missions, Li Gu and the others received new information. They asked for directions and found the Mercenary Alliance. After working for half a day, they finally registered as mercenaries. Seeing the mission list, they were overjoyed. They felt that they had found the right way to accept missions in the galaxy. Li Gu believed that acting alone was the right thing to do, so he was ahead of the other players. The few of them chatted as they walked in. This time, we've gotten the upper hand. Should we tell the others about the mercenary qualifications? Li Gu shook his head. This is an opportunity that we found. We're all competitors. There's no need to tell them. Then, if they ask, do we have to keep a secret? Li Gu thought about it, and his expression became troubled. If others asked and he purposely hid it, he would easily offend them. Just as they were hesitating, they opened the door and found that there was not a single player in the resting room. Where did they all go? A Temple of God player was confused. Chapter 329. They turned around and saw that Han Xiao was the only one left in the lounge. He was sitting on the sofa and playing with his communicator. He raised his head and glanced at them. You guys are back. It's just you guys. Unravel is the fastest to update. For more information, please visit. Li Gu was confused. What do you mean? Everyone else has registered as mercenaries and joined my mercenary group. What about you? Li Gu was stunned. Could it be that the others had already obtained the qualifications to be mercenaries? Then wouldn't all their efforts be in vain? What was a mercenary group? A bad premonition arose spontaneously. "We're already qualified to be mercenaries," Li Gu said honestly. Han Xiao raised an eyebrow and gave them a quest. Join the Black Star Mercenary. Li Gu and the others had nowhere else to go, so they accepted the quest immediately. They then went back to the mercenary hall and joined the mercenary group. Following that, they triggered the mission that the other players had already accepted. When they saw the faction introduction and the mission requirements, they widened their eyes in annoyance. Li Ji's expression darkened. This was supposed to be their privilege, but because they had acted on their own accord, they had been left behind by the other players. Thinking about how his teammates had been so smug earlier, he felt humiliated. Not only had they wasted their efforts, but they had also fallen behind in the mission progress. After asking the other players, Li Gu realized that while the other players were rewarded with an extra 300 contribution points for being the first batch of players to join, he was not. It was too late for regrets. He might as well have stayed obediently at the start. What was the use of running around randomly? Could it be that they understood the galaxy better than Han Xiao? Li Ji's sad story was spread by the other players, and they couldn't stop laughing. They were even more determined to follow Han Xiao. Han Xiao was indeed a guiding light. They didn't know much about the galaxy, so following Han Xiao would definitely bring them the most benefits. It was much more efficient than trying their luck everywhere. With the efforts of the players, the mercenary group's credibility points accumulated bit by bit. Latest update: Han Xiao rented a machinery modification room and gambled on blueprints a few times with new knowledge. He used the materials brought by Blue Star to create an independent combat helmet called the Cine Carbon-Based Biological Detector helmet. It contained multi-layer detection and could scan for life signals within a few kilometers. It also had a more powerful radar function, and it also had a certain level of protection, air filtration, and other life support systems. Han Technician made a few dozen of them and planned to sell them to the players. They were essential support equipment for missions. After a few days, Meet Bao finally edited the first episode of Interstellar Adventure, and it became a hot topic on the forums. Galaxy Adventure Log, Black Star Chapter 1. The title of this episode had already indicated that this was a new series. The opening scene was changed to the cosmic scenery of Shorthorn Star and U-Burley Hub, as well as various strange interstellar species. A few minutes after it was released, there was already a large number of viewers. The Black Phantom series that Meet Bao had done before had already accumulated a solid fan base. His new series was highly anticipated when it was announced. It was the first show to enter the galaxy, and the audience was not only the Blue Star players, but also the foreign players from other novice planets. The number of viewers increased by a few times, and in just 10 minutes, it almost equaled the highest number of viewers of the past episodes. Meet Bao was extremely popular this time. His popularity increased again, and he became the #1 player in the video channel. Wow, he still remembers to update. What the F *CK, 320,000 viewers at the same time. Am I seeing things? Guys, I'm so excited. My foreign friends, let me see your hands. Meet Bao's face appeared on the screen, and he started his usual opening with a despicable tone. Welcome to Galaxy Adventure Log. I'm Meet Bao. Don't you feel that something is missing? That's right, there's no opening poem for this episode, because I haven't thought about it yet. The comments went wild. Latest update: impossible to guard against. This host is shameless. I'm following him. I'll beat this son of a bitch to death. For the first episode of the Black Star chapter, Meet Bao used a special editing method. He did not focus on the introductions, as usual. He edited the process of Han Xiao bringing the players to U-Burley Hub on Shorthorn Star into a movie-like feeling. The introduction was abandoned, and only some humorous narration was added. Coupled with some color rendering, it was refreshing to the audience, as if they were watching a series. Because there was too much material, Meet Bao could not choose, so he simply made it into a story-type video. The length exceeded an hour. The success of the Black Phantom series made him even more ambitious, and he was no longer limited to the introduction and despicable style. Therefore, he made a new attempt with a more artistic style. The results were obvious, and it was a great success. Han Xiao gave him ambition and opportunity. As the video progressed, the scene of the galaxy was also displayed in front of the audience. The vast universe, countless stars, and spaceships of all shapes and sizes made the audience feel like they were in a black hole, mesmerizing them. When Han Xiao appeared, there was a second wave of comments. Shao Qi is here, absorbing Black Phantom at close range. Carrying Black Phantom is a 100-meter sprint. Han Xiao is my husband. No rebuttal. Wow. Black Phantom is in heaven. There will be no more chests to open in the future. I still want to gamble. I want to prove my bloodline. Brother, go to sleep. You have everything in your dreams. A large group of comments floated over, and many of them seemed to be fangirls, but it was not clear how many of them were hooligans. Meat Bao also edited the interaction of the professional players into the video. Of course, this was agreed upon. This group of professional players were familiar with each other and teased each other daily. The interaction was very interesting, and the existence of this group of professional players attracted many fans to watch the video. Many fans of the players sent comments. Then, the scavenger attack appeared, and Han Xiao led the players to protect the spaceship. The comments were rolling, and there were all kinds of comments. Shocking, in this interstellar travel simulator, you can even level up by killing monsters. Black Phantom is still fierce. Not only is he strong in Blue Star, but he can still defeat his enemies in the Interstellar. Seeing that the big Han Xiao is still so awesome, I am relieved. On the way to Uberly Hub, the huge space station shocked the audience, and the video also came to an end. The last scene was when Han Xiao led the players to the Mercenary Alliance, and everyone registered as mercenaries. Han Xiao formed a mercenary group, and the players joined one after another. Then, the camera zoomed in and locked onto the words Black Star, Mercenary, and froze for a full 3 seconds. The audience also watched for a full 3 seconds. Then the screen went black, and the annoying "to be continued" popped up. Meat Bao chose to cut the video here because he saw that this group had a lot of potential. Other than the leader, the members were all players. Watching a familiar NPC lead a group of players and experience some kind of adventure in the Interstellar would definitely arouse the audience's interest. The reality was just as he expected. When the video ended, the audience felt that they had not had enough and did not feel the passage of time. They were all engrossed in the video and even felt like they were following the show. The last 3 seconds of the video, coupled with the strong interest in the future of the mercenary group, made the name Black Star deeply etched in the audience's mind. Of course, another consequence was that the scale of the urging for this episode was unprecedentedly large. So cool. Please update quickly. Waiting for the second episode. It's like locking Meat Bao in a small black room and slapping him to death if he can't make a video. I think he might enjoy it. What are you thinking about above? Slapping is obviously a slap in the face. Your thoughts are not pure. I feel ashamed for you. If I were you, I would King die on the spot. The number of viewers for this episode increased exponentially, causing a phenomenal sensation. The audience was wild, and there were also other professional players who were not chosen by Han Xiao, who were envious and hated themselves for not being able to hold on for 30 seconds. The impact of Meat Bao's episode even made the Galaxy Times, which was released immediately after, hurriedly add a section to share the video clip and give their own comments. Many episodes ago, we once deduced that the storyline characters had their own limitations. When the storyline on them was over, to the players, they would disappear into the crowd. But this time, we found that this deduction was wrong. Black Phantom Han Xiao. Now he should be called Black Star Han Xiao. He proved our mistake. His range of activities was not limited by the civilization level of the planet itself. He went into the galaxy and started the Blue Star, and a new storyline was extended from him. We once thought that Han Xiao was only the main character of Blue Star. But now, it seems that everyone guessed wrong. He has more than one war storyline, and he has a storyline that goes deeper into the galaxy. Compared to other novice planets, the development potential of Blue Star itself is very limited. But there's a pioneer like Han Xiao, and he has always been guiding the storyline forward. Black Star Han Xiao he is not only the main character of a planet-level storyline. The Galaxy Times was brave enough to admit their wrong deduction, and their sincere attitude was well received by the audience. At the same time, it also contributed to the sensation caused by Han Xiao. The divine assistance made Han Xiao's impression in the hearts of the players rise from the so-called planet-level main character to a higher level, which made the players even more curious. How far can he go? Han Xiao also watched these 2 episodes, and the effect achieved what he wanted. His increasing status in the eyes of the players meant that he was accepted on a deeper level. Countless players were excitedly discussing it on the forums, and the popularity continued to rise, becoming the hottest topic. But no one would have thought that this episode of Meet Bao's video would not only be popular for a short period of time, but it would also last longer than anyone could imagine. In the future, countless people would come back to archaeology, and it would be known as Chapter 330. Daily hires were the lowest level of missions. Once the credit points reached a certain level, low-level missions would no longer increase credit points. This classification system was easy to understand. It was convenient for employers to directly understand the abilities of mercenaries and ensure that they could hire a suitable team. 120 points happened to be the first standard. This was the first threshold to select a mercenary group. Only after reaching 120 points could a mercenary group be considered a proper mercenary group, and more employment applications would be opened. The efficiency of professional players was very high. 2 days later, the mercenary group had accumulated 120 credit points. Han Xiao released the faction quest reward. The top 3 credit points were King Admiral Hao Tian and the captain of the Fanatic Squad, Yin Ran. Other than the 4 big families, Han Xiao also recruited the top-ranked clubs in the league, such as Thunderstorm, Fanatics, and so on. Torrential Rain was still alright. They had a beauty like Rainy Kim, so there was quite a lot of attention on them. Compared to them, Fanatics was even more pathetic. They were also a first-tier club, but their presence was extremely weak. To be honest, if Yin Ran hadn't been ranked 3rd in terms of contribution this time, Han Technician would have almost forgotten about her existence. Han Xiao gave out extra rewards to the 3 of them. At the same time, he used a provocative tone to say that the mercenary group would definitely reward them for their contributions. The additional reward was the Sin-A carbon-based creature detector, helmet, that he had just created. It required 800 faction contribution points to exchange for it. He gave it to the 3 of them, as if he had earned 800 faction contribution points for free. This immediately attracted the envy of the other players. At this time, Han Xiao said, "This detection helmet can greatly improve one's field of vision and adapt to a variety of harsh environments." He introduced the functions, implying that this was a must-have equipment for outstation missions, and recommended that everyone exchange for it. Author's note: unravel is the latest update. The 3 of them tried out the functions of the helmet. The built-in screen displayed all sorts of environmental analysis, energy analysis, and so on. It could also be adjusted. The function of the helmet was clear at a glance. It also had the function of protecting the head. It was suitable for equipment of all professions. Madblade was close to Hao Tian, so he borrowed it for a while. He nodded and said, "It's really good stuff." When the others saw this, they followed suit. The 3 helmets were passed around, and everyone experienced the functions. They deeply felt that the functions were very practical, and they all had thoughts of exchanging for them. The first Elder reward and the faction mission reward, most of the players had accumulated 600 faction contribution points. They were only 200 points away from exchanging for the helmet. They were itching to get it. Han Xiao had deliberately set the price at 800 contribution points to give the players the impression that they only needed a little bit of contribution points to get the prize. Apart from completing quests, the other way to earn contribution points was obvious, and that was to sacrifice items and money. It seemed like he was giving away 600 contribution points to most of the players, but in reality, this was bait to lure players to spend money. It was a very common promotion model. Han Xiao implemented the method of giving value to the favorability points. This time, he was giving actual value to the faction relationship. Not only were his items high quality and cheap, but he also had the promotion effect of the faction relationship. He could guarantee that players would have the highest priority to spend on him. The exchange rate that he had temporarily set was within the indifferent to friendly range, 0 to 1,000 contribution points. 50 anas could be exchanged for 100 faction relationship points. Therefore, to the players, the helmet was worth 400 anas, and they only needed to spend 25% of the original price to get it. It was only 100 anas, which was a great deal. Half of the players had obtained 1,500 anas from the short Hornstar mission, so they were very rich and easily exchanged for the helmet. The other half of the players had been doing daily missions for a few days, but the rewards were very little. However, they were very cunning and directly borrowed money from the other half of the players. We're all the best in the industry, and we see each other all the time. It's only 100 anas. Aren't you embarrassed to not lend it to us? Not lending? You're looking down on me. We're all brothers. We'll definitely earn money in the future. You don't have to worry about us not paying you back. You can run away, but the temple can't. Lend me the money, and I'll owe you one. After a series of chaos, these players finally exchanged for the helmet in the form of debt. Of course, the people from the Temple of God owed the most, so Li Gu was very upset. More than 50 customers, a small profit, but a quick turnover. More than 6,000 anas entered his account, and Han Technician's savings were replenished. He was very satisfied. The raw materials for this batch of helmets were materials brought up from Blue Star. The cost was extremely low, and the profit margin was unbelievable. Everyone came to the mercenary hall. Han Xiao was about to open the mercenary interface and accept the Sunil mission when he suddenly realized that the mercenary hall was a little strange today. A group of mercenaries was squeezed in a corner of the hall, and it was very noisy. Han Xiaoxin was curious, so he walked over and saw a short blue-skinned man in the middle of the crowd. He was wearing a loose and luxurious robe, and his hair was like steel nails. His ears were pointy, and he did not have a nose. He had 2 pairs of eyes that were narrowed into slits, and his lips were curved downwards like half-moons. This race was called the Blue Man, and he looked very much like a certain expression. The Blue Man gave the other races the impression that they were stingy, and opportunistic. This Blue Man was for a resource exploration team, funded by a certain financial group. He was recruiting mercenaries offline in the mercenary hall to avoid the small service fee that the Mercenary Alliance had to pay. This Blue Man was called Martin, and he was introducing the job requirements. I'm from a resource exploration team, and I'm going to Planet Gardon 791 for a 3-day field exploration. I want to recruit a group of bodyguards, and each of them will be paid 400 anas. They will be responsible for protecting the exploration team, clearing the surface beasts, and exploring dangerous areas. They need to have at least 120 credibility points. The mercenaries around had cold expressions on their faces. The pay for this job was not very high, and it was not going through the Mercenary Alliance's channels. It was like taking a private job, and it would not be recorded in the resume. They would not be able to increase their credibility points, so it was not very attractive to them. They all watched from the side, and no one came forward to recruit. Han Zhao's eyes flashed. He looked at the star map and said, Planet Gardon 791 is near the Sunil base. I can earn some extra money on this trip. Although it's only 400 anas, I have more than 50 people on my team. Many a little makes a mickle, so it's quite a sum. Some barren planets without life had the name of a star system and a serial number. It was convenient to locate them, and they were basically only used to collect resources. Han Xiao squeezed through the crowd, walked forward, and said, Black Star Mercenary, more than 50 people. Only group employment for now. Let me see your credibility points. Martin sized up Han Xiao and was a little happy. He had been shouting for so long that his voice was hoarse. Finally, someone wanted to recruit him. Han Xiao brought up the mercenary group interface and sent it to Martin. Martin was overjoyed when he saw that his credibility points had met the requirement. He was about to agree, but when he looked down, his expression changed. He said in surprise, You guys have never accepted combat employment before? The Black Star Mercenary's resume showed dozens of daily jobs in the hub. Most of them were cleaning missions. Normal mercenaries would not even bother to do this kind of work. It was almost no different from manual labor. Chapter 331. Han Shao raised his eyebrows and said, "What's wrong with that? My credibility points have already met the requirements. My credibility points have already met." Martin said with disdain, "I want warriors and bodyguards. Your resumes are all about the daily missions in Ubarely Hub. You're just a bunch of janitors. Are you really mercenaries?" Han Shao frowned and said, "What do you mean?" "What I mean is that you don't meet my recruitment requirements." Martin waved his hand impatiently. Although he was very stingy and did not want to pay a high salary, it did not affect his picky appetite. He wanted to pick the best out of the worst. So he spent the least amount of money to hire the mercenaries with the highest value ratio. This had always been the nature of the Naren people, stingy and greedy. Although the average strength of the Black Star mercenary was grade C, this resume made him doubt their actual combat ability. If he recruited unreliable mercenaries, they would not be of any use when the expedition team was in danger. The surrounding mercenaries all started to mock Martin and support him. "It's only 400 anas, and you're still being so picky. Haven't you heard that you get what you pay for?" "Heh, Naren people." Han Shao was annoyed. "Sigh, why are these mercenaries joining in the fun? Why do I feel like they're not helping me at all? Instead, they are adding insult to injury." Martin rolled his eyes and took the opportunity to lower the price. He pretended to be in a difficult position and said, "With your resumes, I can only offer 200 anas per person. Goodbye." Han Shao turned around and left. He was too lazy to argue with Martin. Martin's attitude made him very unhappy. It was never Han technician style to be bullied by others. He did not want to earn this extra income. There were so many opportunities anyway, and he did not want to waste his life on a crooked tree. Han Shao opened the mercenary interface and found the application list of the Sunil race. There were a few missions, all related to the same incident. The Sunil race's homeland was destroyed by Dark Star, and with the help of Ghidorah, they moved to another forest planet with dense natural energy and changed the name to Planet Sunil. Planet Sunil had a large number of native beasts, and most of the time, they were very tame. However, the underground of Planet Sunil contained ores with the nature of mine pollution. Every few years, all the beasts on the planet would enter an inexplicable manic period, causing the new home of the Sunil race to suffer. Every time this happened, the Sunil warriors would return to their home to protect their homeland and recruit a large number of mercenaries to help them. This was a very pitiful race. They were originally just a planet-level civilization, standing aloof from worldly affairs and working hard to develop. However, they were suddenly attacked by Darkstar and met with a calamity. They did not even have the strength to fight back. Darkstar's battleships bombarded the ground, and countless cities were bombarded by lasers and missiles, turning into fireworks that soared into the sky, swallowing the screams and cries. Even despair fell into the void. It was a one-sided massacre. Darkstar and Ghidorah were mortal enemies, and they were very active in the Garten Star system. Darkstar took advantage of Ghidorah's weakness as a member of the lawful faction and attacked the planets under Ghidorah's jurisdiction time and time again, forcing Ghidorah to help the low-level civilizations that were in trouble, thus exhausting Ghidorah's resources. If Ghidorah did not help, their jurisdiction over the Garten Star system would not be stable. Darkstar belonged to the evil faction, and attacking low-level civilizations had long violated the Universal Contact Treaty. However, the Shattered Star Ring was a borderland, and every time they completed a mission, Darkstar would disappear for a long time, avoiding the attacks of other civilizations. They were like a terrifying shadow that always covered the Garden Star system. When Ghidorah's fleet arrived through hyperdrive, the surface of the Sunil mother planet had already become a scorched earth with lava flowing everywhere. The ecosystem had collapsed, and only less than 10% of the people survived, being protected by Ghidorah. The technology of the survivors had been cut off, and they had not recovered all their technology even now. The refugees were settled on planet Sunil, and even the city that they were living in was built with the help of Ghidorah. After settling down for a few years, they discovered the situation with the wild beasts. At this time, it would be very troublesome to migrate again. Godora had helped them the last time out of humanitarianism, and if they asked Godora for help again, many Sunils would feel that this meant that their race had completely become dependent on Godora, and they would not be able to accept it psychologically. Thus, they stuck to their current situation and resisted the wild beasts, barely surviving. It was the time of the wild beasts recently, and the goal of these few missions was to recruit people to protect their home. However, the danger of the missions increased with each level. The most dangerous mission did not even have anyone applying, and the easiest mission required 120 credits. Mercenary Mission, Protect Forest City Mission Introduction. The Sunil race has encountered a new round of catastrophe. You have accepted the mission, and your duty is to protect Forest City. Mission requirements: protect Forest City. Failure condition: Forest City is lost. Failure penalty: -60 credibility points reward, 500,000 EXP, 1,800 ANAs, plus 34 credits, plus 3 area renown mission start time. 12 days later, the Sunil race, called the Wild Beast Catastrophe, and Forest City was the current main city of the Sunil race. This was just a normal mission, and it was not Han Zhao's entire goal. He accepted the mission so that he could have a reasonable identity to contact the Sunil race. Sunil's storyline mission had to be triggered by himself. As one of the members, the players also received the mission of the mercenary group. Han Zhao also released a faction mission that rewarded faction contribution points upon completion of the mission. It seemed like a double reward, and the players felt like they had earned something. This was the Black Star Mercenaries' first combat mission, and everyone was eager to give it a try. Han Zhao waved his hand. Let's go. 3 days later, the group took a direct flight and arrived at planet Sunil. From the perspective of the universe, this was a green forest planet surrounded by white clouds. The tremor came suddenly, and the spaceship entered the atmosphere. The surface of the planet gradually enlarged in their field of vision. The spaceship followed the route, and the sea of trees receded in their field of vision. Han Zhao looked out from the porthole, and a plane appeared in the middle of the forest. A city stood on the plain. This was the new home of the Sunil race, Forest City. The spaceship lowered the airdrop cabin, and Han Zhao and the others felt a slight sense of weightlessness. Then, the ground shook, and they landed steadily. Chi! The cabin door slid open, and outside was a continuous military base. Han Zhao stepped out of the cabin door and saw teams of Sunil soldiers wearing heavy individual armor patrolling and standing guard. Sunil defensive soldier armor, as the name suggested, was the individual combat armor worn by the Sunil soldiers with the quality of a normal person. It was silver gray in color, and the armor plate was extremely thick and could block rapid fire from cannons. After wearing it, the person would feel like they had expanded a few times. The soldier armor weighed close to a ton, and it had its own power unit. It was equipped with large-caliber depleted uranium defense machine guns, shoulder rocket launchers, melee combat wrist saws, and so on. The Sunil race was a pure technological civilization, and when a technological civilization developed to a certain point, they would definitely branch out into individual armor. Different technological civilizations had their own armor styles. The individual armor of the Sunil race was divided into Enlistee class, NCO class, defense class, assault class, reconnaissance class, and so on. In fact, Han Zhao knew that the Sunil race had an even more powerful general class armor. However, with the destruction of their homeland, the manufacturing technology had been lost. Other than the armor technology, there were also mechanical weapons, vehicles, and a few small galactic-level battleships parked in the distance. Looking at the dazzling array of machines, Han Zhao felt extremely satisfied and excited. Civilizations that leaned toward technology were the best breeding ground for the mechanic class. This was also the reason why he had tried so hard to get in touch with the Sunil race. The Sunil race's machinery level just so happened to be able to provide him with a lot of help. There were too many benefits. The Sunil subclass that Han Zhao had his eyes on was related to machinery. It was a rare subclass that could be linked to his main class. For Han Xiao, this was one of the best choices for completing the class advancement. The players were amazed by this scene. Han Xiao had introduced the sad history of the Sunil race on the spaceship. They had originally thought that a fallen civilization would be very sad and backward, but they had not expected to see such an awe-inspiring scene. Thump, thump, thump. Heavy metal footsteps sounded, and an armored warrior approached. His armor was obviously better than a normal soldier's, and it was painted with a war totem that was a mixture of red and white. This was an officer-class armor. The approaching Sunil was obviously an officer. His face was as cold as stone, and he had the aura of a soldier. Chapter 332. Along the way, Nivel was silent, and the Sunil soldiers did not talk much. Everyone's face was tense, as if they did not have the time to communicate and focus on their mission. The air was filled with the metallic smell of the soldiers' armor and a serious, intense atmosphere. It was silent, and only the clanking of the tanks could be heard. The Sunil race was originally a civilization that loved life and worshipped culture and art. The disaster changed their mindset, and the survivors were given a practical and direct attitude by the dangerous environment. This was also reflected in the style of the buildings. The steel fortresses were monotonous and sharp. Looking through the military base into the residential area of the city, the streets were arranged in a square, showing a rigid impression. Nivel led the way, and Han Xiao and the others came to the mercenary area. A large number of mercenaries were gathered there, and it was noisy. Before the catastrophe started, the mercenaries needed to understand the details. Nivel stepped on the stage and said with a deep voice, "The observation team discovered the signs of the beast going berserk 2 months ago, so we started the recruitment. You are all mercenaries who accepted the mission, and you can only get through this by working together. If you want to get the reward, please do your best." After a brief introduction, Nivel went straight to the point. There are prophecy stones growing under this planet, and the prophecy stones have the ability to pollute the soul. All the mineral veins on this planet have merged together to create a psionic force field that shrouds the ecological environment of this planet and subtly affects the soul. Therefore, the beasts on this planet are always in a berserk state and are very aggressive. However, this is not the direct cause of the catastrophe. The psionic undercurrent formed by the prophecy stones will erupt once every few years, and we call it the tide. This is the real cause of the beasts going berserk. This time, the tide of the psionic force field is more than half a year earlier than before. The observation team estimates that the catastrophe will erupt in full force in the next 7 to 13 days. Our enemies are all the beasts on this planet. Normally, in the first 3 to 6 days of the catastrophe, we will only face small beasts, which are equivalent to a group of weak beasts being chased away by stronger beasts. Then came the middle period, which lasted for about 10 days. The battles were the most frequent, the beasts were almost endless, and the enemies were getting stronger and stronger. Blood gathered into rivers, and smoke condensed into clouds. The last 5 days or so will be the last phase of the cataclysm. This is the most dangerous phase. At this time, our vehicles and manpower have been greatly depleted, and the enemies we face are the most powerful beasts. They are attracted by the smell of blood of countless dead beasts. At this time, a mercenary interrupted, "You have tanks, airplanes, and even interstellar battleships. Isn't killing wild beasts a massacre?" Nivel glanced at him coldly. "You will understand when the catastrophe arrives." Immediately after, Nivel opened the projection and showed the introduction of the beasts one by one. He introduced the beasts of this planet, which were also the monsters that everyone was about to face. Han Xiao took a few glances. The beasts on planet Sunil were far stronger than those on Blue Star. The prophecy stone had existed for countless years, and its spiritual power could subtly influence the evolution tendencies of the beasts. The beasts on planet Sunil lived by fighting. The strong survived, and the weak were eliminated. Since we know that the beasts are the enemy, why don't we kill all the beasts? Maple Moon asked curiously. Because of the symbiotic nature of the ecosystem, Madblade said hesitantly. But this is already a threat to the continuation of the race. What ecosystem is there to consider? Meatbow disagreed. The problem is, can we kill all of them? The players started to argue. They all had their own opinions about the Sunil race's actions. There were more than 100 types of beasts. After explaining them, Nivell distributed the information to every mercenary and gave them missions according to the missions they had accepted. Latest update, the Sunil race had many resource extraction points and various facilities in the wild. But during the catastrophe, all the people gave up on these points and returned to Forest City. They gathered all their forces to protect one place and reduce the chances of being attacked. The main city was the last barrier. Forest City had 5 defense circles, and the job that Han Xiao had accepted was to protect the second last defense circle. This was relatively the safest job. The other missions were to protect the reconnaissance aircraft, protect the sky battleships, and provide reinforcements. Forest City had many defensive measures, and the main city was the core of the defense to take advantage of the geographical advantage. Forest City was not a dead zone, and there were escape tunnels underground. If Forest City showed signs of being breached, they would move the people in advance and escape from underground or in the sky. Therefore, the main city was not impossible to lose. There were also powerful beasts underground and in the sky. If they were attacked by unstoppable beasts in these 2 places, they would fall and be buried alive. Therefore, these 2 were the last resort. The 2 most dangerous jobs were field reconnaissance and field combat. Planet Sunil was covered in forests, and there were blind spots for reconnaissance in the sky. Therefore, field reconnaissance was essential. Carrying out missions in the wild during the catastrophe was very dangerous. If they found a beast that was too dangerous heading toward the main city, they would need the field combat team to kill the beast before it reached the main city or divert it. The survival rate was extremely low. Therefore, no mercenaries had ever applied for these 2 jobs. They were all done by their own warriors. The mercenaries in different positions were each led to their positions by an officer. Nivell led the group of mercenaries that Han Xiao was in to familiarize them with their positions. Time passed quickly, and the sky darkened. The mercenaries all lived in the military base, but Han Xiao needed to enter the city to complete his subclass goal. He found Nivell alone and asked, "I want to apply to enter Forest City. Why do you want to enter the city?" Nivell frowned. "Some private matters. I have a friend in the city, and I want to visit him." "No." Nivell rejected immediately. To prevent any hidden dangers, mercenaries were not allowed to enter the city unless absolutely necessary. They could only move around in the military base. "You can't use this reason to enter the city, but your friend can visit you," Nivell added. Han Xiao had a helpless expression. He wanted to meet a key storyline character, but the other party did not even know him. Why would they visit him? Could he only sneak in secretly? He had the Mask of Disguise and the Night Stalker subclass, so the success rate of sneaking in should be quite high, right? Who? This time, a gust of wind descended from the sky, and a few beams of light hit the ground. A spaceship hovered above the base, and a gangway was lowered. Sunil supers walked down one after another. They were all mercenaries who had gone out to earn commissions. Before the catastrophe arrived, they all returned to their own race. On the ground, the Sunil soldiers raised their heads. Worship, excitement, and yearning flashed in their eyes as they saluted in unison. Every time the warriors of their own race returned, they would enjoy a grand welcome ceremony and be loved by everyone. Han Xiao had sharp eyes. He saw someone familiar and shouted, "Hey, Lurden!" Green Knight Lurden was also in the crowd. He heard the shout and turned around. After thinking for a while, he remembered that this was someone he had fought side by side with. Blue flames spouted from his feet as he landed in front of Han Xiao. He asked in surprise, "Why are you here?" "Blackstar is a mercenary." Nivell saluted and answered first. "So, you're a mercenary too." Lurden realized, "I just registered. I heard that your race is in danger, so I came. I didn't expect to be fighting side by side with you." Han Xiao was familiar with this. "I have an acquaintance in the city and hope to visit. Can you do me a favor?" "If he's your friend, then no problem," Nivell said. Lurden thought about it. The two of them had fought side by side before. Although they had not known each other for long, he felt that Han Zhao's identity was not dangerous, and he was quite strong. He did not mind doing a small favor, so he nodded and said, "Okay, I'll accompany you into the city, thanks." Han Zhao smiled. It was so convenient to know an acquaintance. He could solve the problem with one sentence, and there was no need to take the risk of sneaking in. After not seeing each other for a while, Lurden's prosthetic body had been repaired. Han Zhao followed him through the sentry post. The rest of the returning Sunil supers also entered the city first. Han Zhao and Lurden followed behind this team. Boom! Chapter 333. The impending catastrophe had originally made the civilians panic, but now, everyone on the streets was smiling, as if the return of the supers had dispelled their fear. "I'll bring you into the city. According to the rules, I have to accompany you the entire time," Lurden said. Han Zhao did not mind and said, "Your race seems to worship supers a lot." "To be exact, it's excitement," Lurden said calmly. "Our race suffered a huge change and moved to this dangerous planet. After so many years, we still haven't gained a foothold. The efficiency of collecting resources is too slow, and it's not enough for our own consumption. Many materials have to be bought from the galaxy, and our productivity can't support foreign trade. Therefore, in our race, the supers who are strong enough will enter the galaxy and become mercenaries. Most of their rewards will be handed to the race. This is an important economic pillar for our race. Otherwise, we wouldn't have enough resources to make so many weapons and survive the catastrophe." Han Zhao understood. As a fallen civilization, the Sunil race could only rely on strong individuals to support the entire race. Therefore, they were treated like heroes. Becoming a supers was an honor in the eyes of the civilians, so they all worshipped martial arts. Han Zhao still remembered that Lurden was very calculative when it came to money. However, in reality, Lurden's rewards were almost all handed to the race. He lived frugally just to earn more money for the race. Relying on strong individuals to support the economy is sick for a civilization, Han Zhao said. Lurden nodded. "Indeed, but this is a choice we have no choice but to make. Ultimately, it's because the catastrophe slowed down the race's recovery, so we had to spend a large portion of our resources to make weapons to resist the catastrophe. We couldn't expand and build quickly, so there were many unnecessary losses. If we don't completely solve the catastrophe, we won't be able to break this cycle of evil. The race will live in torment and never be able to get out of this terrible situation. We've tried many methods, even considering killing all the beasts, but this is the worst plan. Regardless of whether it can be done or not, once the ecological chain collapses, the whole planet will go from being full of life to being destroyed. That's why the race chose a different method to mine the prophecy stone mine. It's to destroy the cataclysm from the source, which is the least harmful. This work has been going on for many years, removing the ores bit by bit. As long as we persevere, sooner or later, the mind current will disappear. At that time, the race will no longer be troubled by the cataclysm." A hint of yearning appeared on Lurden's indifferent face. He murmured, "Tough times will always pass. Unravel is the fastest to update." Han Zhao had a basic impression of the Sunil race. This was a pretty stubborn race. The stronger the supers were, the greater the responsibility. For the continuation of the race, they were willing to work hard without complaint. What a pity! Thinking back to the development of the Sunil race in his previous life, Han Zhao could not help but sigh. After entering the city, the supers dispersed and returned to their homes. The crowd also gradually dispersed. Following his memory, Han Zhao took a few turns and eventually came to a deserted alley. He stopped in front of a narrow, black door. The sign next to the door had a picture of a wine cup. "Bar? Is the person you want to visit here?" Lurden frowned. "Is there a problem?" "No." Lurden was expressionless. He despised all those who spent money to enjoy life, thinking that they were wasting money and lives. After all, he had already lost the ability to enjoy life. Pushing open the door, the bar was dimly lit, and there was not a single customer. The city was in a tense period, so basically no one would get drunk. Han Xiao walked to the bar counter and heard soft snoring coming from behind the bar counter. Han Technician looked over and saw a man lying on the floor behind the bar counter. The side of his face was close to the floor. He was sound asleep with a pile of empty bottles beside him. Bang! Han Xiao slammed the table and said, "We have a customer. Get up." The man first moved his fingers and let out a lazy snort from his nostrils. Then he slowly got up. His breath reeked of alcohol, and his eyes were still sleepy. He had not come back to his senses yet. He said, "What do you want to drink?" "2 glasses." "1 glass is enough," Lurden interrupted. "Give me the money first." The man yawned. Han Xiao took out his communicator and was about to transfer the money when the man suddenly laughed. "Dear, you're not thinking of paying with anas, are you? This is a small business. I only accept local currency." Lurden frowned. He was usually active in the galaxy, so the Sunil currency was not very useful to him. He was about to pay for Han Xiao when Han Xiao smiled and said, "I don't have local currency. Can I pay with something else?" The man did not even look at Han Xiao. He took out a bottle of alcohol from under the counter, opened it, and took a sip. He said casually, "What is it?" "A name." The man's lips curled downward. He looked very impatient. He glanced at Han Xiao and said in annoyance, "I'm not interested in guessing games. If you don't want to drink, get out of my bar." "Delphius." Han Xiao's tone was calm, but it was like thunder in the man's ears. The man, who was about to raise his head to drink, froze. His lazy expression disappeared, and he became expressionless. He had not looked drunk at all. The drunkenness in his eyes disappeared instantly, and he stared at Han Xiao with a threatening gaze. He slowly put down the bottle and said slowly, "Sit down and wait. I'll go wash my face first." Then, the man walked out of the bar and went to the toilet. Han Xiao and Lurden were the only ones left at the bar. Lurden suddenly said, "You don't know him at all. You're not visiting someone you know." "I know his brother, so I'm here to visit him," Han Xiao explained casually. This drunkard boss was called Haluz, and Delphius was his brother. The subclass that Han Xiao had his eyes on was called Ordnance Engineer. To the players, this subclass was very rare. There was a way to change subclasses in Sunil, and the item that triggered it was called Delphius's Handbook. Delphius was a military mechanic before the Sunil disaster. He was very famous, and many innovative machines were invented by him. He wrote some of his experiences in his handbook. Later, when Darkstar attacked and Delphius died, the handbook was passed down to his younger brother, Haluz, and became a relic. Han Xiao wanted to borrow the handbook from Haluz so that he could complete the subclass change. After a while, Haluz returned to the bar and washed his hair. He was a middle-aged Sunil. His skin had a light indigo color, and there were a few protruding lines on his forehead near his temples. He had a lifespan of about 150 years. Other than that, he was not much different from the humans of the universe. Haluz opened a bottle of wine, passed it to Han Xiao, and said, "Although I don't know how you found me, my brother's name is worth a bottle of wine. I brewed it myself." Thick white smoke came out of the bottle, and the smell of the wine was pungent. The wine brewed by the Sunils used the leaves of some kind of tree as the raw material, so it had a bitter taste. Han Xiao took a sip and felt the numbness at the tip of his tongue. He then expressed his intention. "I'm a mechanic. I've heard of your brother's name, so I want to borrow his handbook." "That's it." Haluz raised his eyebrows and asked tentatively, "That's it for now." Han Xiao chuckled, glanced at Lurden, and said meaningfully, "Do you think I have other motives?" Haluz got a vague reply, and his tone turned cold. "Is this a threat?" No, this is kindness." Han Xiao smiled. "But a good person like you definitely won't have the heart to reject such an unimportant request." Lurden had no idea what the two of them were talking about. Is this human language? Why can't I understand? Haluz seemed to be hesitating, but in the end, his expression turned to one of helplessness. He turned around and entered the room. After a while, he came out with an old diary in his hand. He slammed on the counter and said in annoyance, "Hurry up and leave after reading it." Han Xiao touched the diary, and a notification appeared on the interface. "You have received Delphi's handbook." "Got it." Han Xiao suppressed the joy in his heart, opened the diary, and pretended to read it. It was all in Sunil language, and it looked like English clothes. However, it did not matter if he did not understand it. A progress notification popped up on the interface. As long as he finished reading this book, he would be able to change his class. According to the normal mission channels, obtaining this handbook required a lot of luck, and the process was extremely complicated. After all, no one knew Halu's identity beforehand, so most people would not try to make a good impression on a bar owner who looked like a random person. The normal result was that after getting familiar with Haluz, during a drink, the drunk Haluz would miss his brother and take out this book. Only then would the player be able to trigger the class change coincidentally. However, Han Xiao knew his secret information, so he went straight to the point, skipped the complicated process, and borrowed it. Lurden glanced at it and asked, "You know Sunil language?" Han Xiao closed the book and said, "No, I don't." "Then you still want to read it?" Haluz glared at him. "Just treat it as me admiring your brother. Thank you for the wine." Han Xiao put down the diary, smiled, and left. Haluz shouted behind him, "Weird guy, don't disturb me again. You never know." Han Xiao had a teasing look in his eyes. Walking out of the bar, Han Xiao opened the interface and looked at the latest notification. He was in a good mood. After being stuck on the class change requirement for so long, he finally got the subclass that he wanted. The EXP on the interface could finally be used. Chapter 334. Ordnance Engineer LVL1. +1 end, +3 int, +1. 5% Machinery Affinity, +2 free attribute points, +1 potential point. You have learned the War Machinery Essence ability. You have learned Rapid Ordnance Maintenance. There would be a chain reaction between the Ordnance Engineer class and the Mechanic class. The Ordnance Engineer's skills and attributes were very compatible with the Mechanic class, and it was almost equivalent to half of the main class. Updated at the earliest. As the name suggested, the Siege Lion was an intelligence class. It did not have any combat skills, but it was more useful for mechanics than combat skills. Ordnance referred to war machines, such as guns, armor, shields, and so on. This subclass would have additional enhancements when creating and using war machines. Han Xiao had piles of experience in his waist. With a wave of his hand, he directly leveled up the two skills to the maximum level. War Machine Mastery LV10. Gain an additional 18% attack and defense when using war machines. Quick Ordnance Maintenance LVL10. Plus 24% speed when repairing war machines. Randomly restores 3 to 6% durability during the repair process. Triggering rate depends on INT. Unlimited number of times. The effects of these two skills were simple and crude, but they were quite useful to Han Technician. However, the main reason he had obtained this subclass was to obtain the ability after reaching the maximum level. He spent more than 90 million EXP to level up his subclass to the maximum level. This subclass gave him a total of 10 END, 30 INT, 15% Machinery Affinity, 20 free attribute points, and 10 potential points. If his new skills were maxed out, he would have a few more potential points. Latest update. Han Zhao's intelligence attribute had reached 391. He put all of his free attribute points into intelligence and broke through the 400 mark required for class advancement. The Ordnance Engineer was now at max level. Just like the Night Stalker, a new ability had appeared. You have learned Militarized Modification. You have received the talent Ordnance Mass Production. Military Modification LV10. When creating or modifying combat machines, plus 8%, 14% to the equipment base attribute. Note, this bonus is calculated separately and has nothing to do with strengthening and modification. This is equivalent to an additional enhancement. It's pretty decent. Han Xiao nodded and looked at the newly obtained specialty. This was what he valued the most. Mass production bonus. This was the essence of this subclass. There were a few signs of a mechanic's growth, and high-speed assembly during battle was one of them. It was one of the reasons for the rise of the mechanic class in version 3.0. Assembly line mass production was a sign of the later stages. Mass production was a necessary ability of the mechanic class's most violent and most expensive fighting style, army style and storm style. Normal mechanics used high-quality weapons that were strengthened by essence, and mass-produced weapons were consumables of lower quality. As mechanical technology improved, the gap between different quality would become bigger and bigger. However, quantitative changes could accumulate into qualitative changes, and those scattered bonuses would result in a world of difference through mass production. Author's note: this is the first time the mechanic class has been upgraded. The mechanic class and the mage class were two classes that had very high benefits in the later stages of the game. The mechanical army style and the magic summoning style could turn a duel into a group fight, which was extremely disgusting. Almost all players could not withstand the waves of rush from these two combat styles, and their gaming experience was extremely bad. However, although these two styles were strong, they had a huge limitation, and the reason was obvious. They were very expensive. Mass-producing a mech legion was extremely expensive for the players. Furthermore, at that time, all the players' individual combat ability would be strong enough. Even if the army style could overwhelm the opponent with a sea of players, their own army would be greatly depleted. If they participated in the Pro League, the army style's combat ability would be in a constant state of decline. The army style that had accumulated for an entire season would be depleted after 10 or 20 matches. If the army style clashed with the army style, oh wow, that would be so cool. A group battle would be a grand spectacle, and the spectators would be happy. However, both sides would be completely wiped out, and not a single strand of hair would be left. Therefore, in Han Zhao's previous life, the army style and the storm style were known as legendary styles, and they were extremely rare. If one saw such players, they would definitely cherish them. After all, they could betray the sect at any time. Han Zhao had analyzed the situation. The players were relatively weak now, and he could personally trample on them. However, in the later stages, the players would become more and more powerful, and he did not want to take too many risks. Therefore, developing the army style was a necessary choice, even if it was just a trump card. The army style is very expensive. In the eyes of the Han technician, a problem that could be solved with money was not a problem at all. This was especially so when this talent could even reduce the cost. Seeing these words, Han Zhao felt as if he had drunk a cup of hot water. His entire body was comfortable and nourished, and all kinds of illnesses could be cured. Han Zhao had a more long-term plan for his growth. Although he had not learned the assembly line knowledge yet, he wanted to obtain a useful talent first. His total level was 80, and he had also met the requirement for class advancement. The level 80 class advancement mission required him to sacrifice 60 million EXP. It was simple and straightforward. Han Zhao could not help but feel relieved. The random class advancement mission this time was considered very easy. In version 2.0, the level cap was 90, and in version 1.0, the level cap was 60. Players did not know about class advancement missions in version 1.0 because they could not level up. This meant that players had to undergo 2 class advancement missions in version 2.0, level 60 and level 80. The level 60 class advancement was the key dividing line for race evolution, so the level 80 class advancement was relatively easier. However, the so-called simple was only according to the standards of the Han technician. If players wanted to accumulate 60 million EXP, they would need to spend a very long time. He had only spent 90 million EXP to level up from 70 to 80. Players were not as rich as the Han technician, so they could only slowly grind their way up level by level. One could imagine the significance of this amount to them. Furthermore, sacrificing this amount of EXP was equivalent to not gaining anything. This kind of class advancement requirement would make players very blue. Han Xiaoxin was very happy. Now, there are only 2 class advancement missions left. As long as I earn enough money from this mission, I can go back home and get married. I can go back and change my class to my new main class. After leaving the bar, Han Zhao and Lurden strolled on the streets of Forest City. The sky was filled with thousands of stars, and the soft starlight fell on their shoulders. Although the environment of this planet was dangerous, the scenery was very beautiful. The green mountains in the distance, the verdant forests, the rustling of leaves in the wind that seemed to have been dyed in green, and the resplendent galaxy that hung upside down above his head. Back then, the Sunil refugees had been moved to this planet by God Aura, probably because they had taken a fancy to the natural environment here. Han Xiao shook his head. He could not help but think of a famous quote from Lu's son. Dangerous things often have beautiful appearances. Where else are you going? Lurden asked. Just walking around. Then let's leave the city and return to the base. Don't you have anywhere to go in the city? Han Xiao asked. Lurden shook his head. I don't have a family. Han Xiao stroked his chin and asked, What mission do you have? Field combat. This is the most dangerous job. You Sunil Super's hand over the hard-earned money and even risk your life to carry out dangerous missions. Such dedication, as expected of a hero of the race. Lurden had a complicated look in his eyes. He wanted to say something, but stopped. In the end, he shook his head and did not say anything. This expression was seen by Han Xiao, and he was secretly overjoyed. He had obtained the information he wanted from the test. If I'm not wrong, the Sunil storyline already exists. Han Xiao narrowed his eyes. Chapter 335. Lurden went to report to the field reconnaissance team. For the next few days, Han Xiao could only stay in the military base. However, since he had already completed his subclass, he did not need to enter the city for the time being. As the date of the catastrophe approached, the influence of the tide became more and more obvious. Everyone felt that something was wrong. There would always be a vague whisper in their mind, sounding very distant, as if they had never heard it before. However, for some reason, they had the illusion that they could understand it, but when they tried to listen carefully, it would disappear. It was very strange. The frequency of the mental whisper matched with the wave section of the brainwave, and it could affect the emotions of the mercenaries. Because of this, the actions of the mercenaries gradually became more and more irritable. However, the Sunil soldiers were used to it. Their minds were firm, and they were not affected. This was the low-intensity mental current formed by the prophecy stones. Intelligent creatures were more resistant and would not be affected easily. However, every time the tide gushed out, the strength of the mental whisper would increase, and everyone would be able to experience what the beasts felt every day. After living with the brainwashing whisper for a long time, all it took was a small spark to make them lose all rationality and follow their killing instincts. The tide was the spark, and this was also the source of the catastrophe. On this day, the ear-piercing alarm sounded in every corner of the military base. Everyone was familiar with the meaning of this sound. The enemy was attacking. The atmosphere in the military base suddenly changed, becoming solemn and serious. The Sunil soldiers ran back to their positions, and the mercenaries, who had been trained for the past few days, quickly found their positions. All kinds of tanks and defense tanks were activated, and countless floating turrets rose up. Rings of airflow spread out, stirring up sand and dust. 9 galactic-level battleships slowly floated in the air like 9 floating fortresses, guarding the sky above Forest City and occupying 9 directions. Han Xiao suddenly looked down. A few stones were bouncing on the ground. First, there was a slight tremor, then it became more and more intense. Finally, there were rumbling sounds coming from all directions. The forest in all directions was swaying, and the loud, sharp, and ferocious roars of beasts turned into sound waves, shaking the sky. The swaying of the forest was like a snake slithering through the grass, quickly approaching the border between the forest and the plain. Net something was coming out. Countless people swallowed at the same time, so nervous that they were sweating. Roar! Their roars were like rolling thunder. Trees fell, and wild beasts broke out of the forest. The horde of beasts squeezed together and dashed madly. Their sizes varied, and they were like a rapidly spreading black tide that filled his line of sight. Just by looking at this scene, many people felt suffocated from the bottom of their hearts. Fire! An officer roared ferociously. Boom! Boom! In the next moment, a series of deafening explosions rang out from the defensive circle. In the middle of the battlefield, the sound of the cannons on all sides made their eardrums buzz, making them almost deaf. The catastrophe was coming. Forest City had a total of 5 defensive perimeters. The first perimeter was a deep defensive perimeter with a large number of minefields and automatic turrets. According to the strategic plan, the first perimeter would be able to reduce the density of the wild beasts by a large margin. The second perimeter was a buffer zone made up of bunkers, trenches, traps, spikes, high-voltage electric walls, and other defensive measures. The floating turrets, war vehicles, and interstellar battleships in the sky would be there to attack the wild beasts head-on. The third perimeter was a steel perimeter, where armored defense teams were stationed. If the wild beasts pounced on this perimeter, they would enter a direct battle, and the defense team would unleash a furious storm of metal on the wild beasts. Nivel was guarding this perimeter. The last 2 perimeters were artillery positions to provide support to the front. The second last perimeter had reinforcements stationed there to listen to orders and provide support at any time. The last perimeter was the last barrier that could not be moved, and it was responsible for logistics. During the short buffer period after every battle, it had to repair a large number of machines and treat the wounded. The Black Star Mercenaries perimeter was the second last perimeter in the north, and it was organized into a long-range heavy tank perimeter designated as G7. 3 Fortress-class defense tanks were the core, and they could be embedded into the ground to become super-large turrets. They were equipped with 18 mobile heavy cannons and a certain number of ground guards. As the tanks moved, they would shoot at the wild beasts in the distance from high angles. As a mechanic, Han Technician's job was to control one of the heavy cannons, and his only mission was to shoot. Mechanics were usually assigned as gunners in this type of perimeter battle. Mechanical bonuses could increase the firepower, and Han Shao was no exception. In such a huge disaster, unless one was unbelievably strong, the strength of an individual would be very small. Boom! Countless burning arcs of light shot out from Forest City's defensive perimeter and flew into the distance, covering the sky and the earth. They exploded amidst the horde of beasts, creating a mixture of red and black smoke. The beasts were blown into the sky one after another, their limbs and bones flying everywhere. Their blood and brains were dyed the same color as the beast brains. The front line of the Black Tide was blocked, but the wild beasts at the back were not afraid of death. They stepped on the corpses and blood as they advanced. The rain of steel pierced through the bodies of the wild beasts, and the scene was extremely bloody. The smell of smoke and blood mixed with the hot air and swept into the perimeter. Bang! 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 Every time Han Shao fired the cannon, he could feel the strong recoil. He could clearly see a burning flame with a trail of smoke coming out of the muzzle and exploding in the horde of beasts thousands of meters away. An orange flower was raised in the endless black tide. The feeling of controlling the heavy cannons and firing at what was very satisfying. It was just shooting and exploding. Experience kept appearing on the interface. Using the senile weapons, the experience gained from killing monsters was reduced to a certain extent. Han Shao mainly used this to determine how much experience the players could gain from killing monsters. However, looking at the excited looks on the players' faces when firing the cannons, he knew that the rewards and fun would not be bad. Being in such a large army, every player had a special feeling, as if they were participating in a huge event. It was very exciting. The Black Tide was blocked outside the first line of defense. Facing the overwhelming firepower, it was difficult for them to advance an inch, leaving behind a pile of blood and flesh. Beside him was another Birdman mercenary who was controlling the heavy cannons. He casually controlled the cannons and said, "The catastrophe is not as scary as the senile said. The wild beast can't get in at all." Han Shao glanced at him and did not say anything. This Birdman mercenary definitely did not listen to the seniles and the catastrophe seriously. This was only the first wave of the catastrophe. It was just a group of small beasts, and the largest was no more than 10 meters. According to the guide, these were just appetizers. The beasts that appeared later were the real nightmare. The cannons fired for a full 4 hours before there was a hard-earned vacuum. The logistics team hurriedly replenished the ammunition and sent out the disinfection team with flamethrowers to burn the blood and corpses on the battlefield. At the same time, the soldiers changed shifts. All the positions had to be changed several times. No one could stay on the same shift in such a high-intensity battle. Han Shao also walked down from the fort to rest. The roar of a plane could be heard above his head, and a new batch of reconnaissance planes took off. The field reconnaissance team and field combat team had already entered deep into the forest. Their job was dozens of times more dangerous than positional warfare, and they could die at any time. It was like a small boat in a raging wave. Not long after, the field recon team returned. The next wave of beasts was about to arrive. The people who changed shifts were all in position, ready for battle. The previous scene repeated, but this time, the black tide started to slowly move forward, gradually approaching the first line of defense. This time, the fighter jets took off and launched missiles from above. The firepower covered the entire area and stopped the beasts once again. The Sunil fighter jets were small and very agile. The wings were similar to the Amphiptera mechanical suits steering propellers. Han Shao could tell at a glance that this kind of structure was very good at agile aerial combat. The enemy was very far away. Even though the beasts were endless, the mercenaries around did not look nervous at all. It was as if the distance gave them a sense of security. Plus, they were surrounded by steel fortresses, giving them the illusion that they were very safe. On the other hand, the Sunil soldiers were worried and solemn like dark clouds gathering between their brows. At this time, a black shadow appeared in the sky far away. The flying beasts showed up and quickly approached. There were small flying beasts less than a meter long and medium-sized flying beasts with a wingspan of a few meters. They looked very ferocious, and they were all creatures that Han Shao had never seen before. They looked like dung beetles that had become gods. Just as this thought flashed through Han Zhao's mind, the G7 officer shouted, "The flying beasts usually appear around the third day. This time, they are ahead of schedule. Switch to high explosive bombs, raise the muzzle, and fire at the sky." The cannons did as they were told. The sky exploded, and bloody flying beasts fell from the sky one after another. The fighter jet rose to a higher altitude, shaking off the flying beast's entanglement. Its body swayed, and the orange-colored bullets fired from its autocannons were like whipping whips. The fighter jet was equipped with a simple energy shield. This wave of flying beasts only had sharp teeth and claws as means of attack. They could only cause crackling electric arcs to appear on the energy shield. The tail end of the fighter jet kept breaking through the sound barrier, killing in and out of the group of flying beasts. It was like an armored cavalry piercing through the infantry formation time and time again. This was already the scale of a large-scale ground war. Time passed quickly in the fierce battle. At first, the mercenaries were very relaxed, but after only 3 days, the strength of the beasts increased rapidly. Gradually, no one could laugh anymore. After continuous high-intensity battles, everyone was showing signs of fatigue. Han Shao tried his best to do his job and play the role of the cog in the chain. On the 4th day, the enemies that threatened the safety of the rear appeared. The ground moved up and down like waves. A group of drilling beasts crossed the first 2 lines of defense and crashed into the alloy wall of the 3rd line of defense, breaking out of the ground. This was the first time the rear lines saw a group of beasts up close. The appearance of the drilling beasts was the signal for the start of the contact battle. The supers on standby behind the 3rd line of defense could finally be of use. Chapter 336. The beasts that broke out of the ground bared their fangs and pounced toward the steel defense line. Boom! Boom! The sound of the Sunil soldiers' large-caliber defensive machine guns firing was more like the sound of cannons. Flames more than a meter long shot out from the muzzle of the guns, and depleted uranium armor-piercing bullets and explosive bullets swept across the area. The burrowing beasts were sent flying as if they were whipped by an invisible giant hand. They fell to the ground and were focused on by the bullets, howling in pain as they rolled around. Their shells and flesh were smashed into a pulp, leaving sticky marks on the dry ground. "Hold the defense line." Neville's tone was cold and hard. He commanded the B-12 defense team through the combat channel that came with the NCO-class armor. He had 30 soldiers under him, and they cooperated to create a net of firepower to block the wild beasts in this area. While firing, Neville scanned his surroundings. This wave of burrowing beasts did not cause any trouble. They only damaged some armor, and there were no casualties. It was scary but not dangerous. Boom! 2 dark burrowing beasts suddenly broke out of the ground beside the B-12 defense team. These were 2 fish that had escaped the net. They opened their bloody mouths and pounced at Neville and a soldier beside him. The attack was very sudden. Before the other defense team members could turn their guns around, Neville had already reacted. He threw away his gun and reached out his hands. His steel palms accurately grabbed the beast's open jaws in midair, preventing the fangs from piercing through his helmet. At this moment, the mechanical arms spat out a stream of air, and the mechanical parts started to move. All the joints in his body were locked, and he resisted the beast's enormous strength. The next second, he twisted his wrist, and a rotating wrist saw popped out. With a swoosh, the beast's jaws were cut in half. Then, Neville endured the beast's flailing claws in pain and rammed his shoulder into the beast, flipping it over. He raised his metal foot and stepped on its throat. Like a nail, he pressed down on the struggling beast. He quickly took out 2 electromagnetic pistols from the slots on his waist and shot through the beast's skull. Blood splattered all over the armor, and the tactical screen was also stained with mucus. Latest update: this series of actions was done swiftly, without the slightest bit of clumsiness that came with wearing heavy armor. However, the other soldier who was attacked was not as powerful. His helmet was bitten until it was deformed and almost flattened. Blood spurted out from the gaps in the helmet as he swayed and fell. This was the first soldier to die. Before he died, he fired a few shots at the beast's belly, fulfilling his last duty. Before he fell, he was worried that Neville was in danger and wanted to help his captain. He turned his gun, but unfortunately, he did not have the strength to pull the trigger. The serene and misty class armor increased the combat quality of normal soldiers, and the thick steel power armor gave the soldiers the ability to fight against strong beasts. Neville's NCO class armor was even more powerful. Even though he was not a super himself, with the armor's ability and his experience as a veteran, he would not lose to the super mercenaries who were coming in as reinforcements. Neville picked up the defensive machine gun and opened fire with his companions to kill the beast. He glanced at the body of his subordinate and said in a calm tone, "Don't worry about him. Don't mess up the formation." He had been in the army for more than a decade, and he could not count how many times he had put on this armor. In his long service life, he had participated in the Dark Star disaster, experienced the Great Migration, led the reconnaissance team in the initial exploration of Planet Senil, and experienced every catastrophe. His comrades kept dying, and the number of veterans kept dwindling. His old friends disappeared one after another. Neville's team had been replaced many times. His subordinates now were all new recruits who had just joined the army a few years ago. He always led the team to carry out dangerous missions, so the team often suffered heavy losses, including many friends he had known for many years. There was no such word in his dictionary. Neville did not care about the deaths of his subordinates. In order to protect the race, sacrifices were unavoidable. This had always been his creed. In the eyes of others, Neville was undoubtedly a very cold-blooded officer. After defeating this wave of beasts, the field reconnaissance team sent back a message. There was a few minutes of vacuum. Neville immediately applied for logistical repair. An equipment vehicle came to the side of the formation, and a team of repairmen carried all kinds of equipment and steel plates to repair the defense team's armor. Neville was surrounded by a group of repairmen with welding equipment. This time, he saw Han Shao walk over. Book updated at the earliest. Because of Lurden, Neville had a certain impression of Han Shao. He said in a deep voice, Mercenary, return to your position. I want to apply for a change of mission, Han Xiao said. There is no safer job than yours now. Nivel's tone was stiff. He had seen many mercenaries who applied for a change of mission on the spot. They were all scared by the catastrophe and did not want to stay in the dangerous front line. The Sunil race would not force mercenaries to participate in dangerous battles. They would only deduct a certain amount of credit and reward. Of course, for such mercenaries, Nivel usually dismissed them with a wave of his hand. He felt that saying one more word would be a waste of energy. He would rather use this time to close his eyes and rest to recover some stamina. However, the safest job that these mercenaries could apply for was Han Zhao's current position. Nivel did not know what was going on with this Black Star. Was he afraid of death? No, he was Lurden's friend. He did not look like this kind of person. Nivel suppressed the impatience in his heart and asked, "What do you want?" "My team wants to join the field reconnaissance team." As soon as he said that, the soldiers and mercenaries resting around all looked at him with surprise. Nivel thought that he had heard wrong. This was the most dangerous mission, and mercenaries would avoid it like the plague. This was the first time that someone had voluntarily requested to join a reconnaissance mission. Silence was Nivel's style, but at this time he could not help but ask why. "My team members have some special abilities. They are most suitable for carrying out dangerous missions." Han Xiao pretended to say, "Plus, Lurden is my friend. Even so, I still have to pay. This is my principle. I will apply to the higher-ups." Neville's tone was not as cold as before, and the soldiers around him were even more respectful. A mercenary that they had never seen before was willing to take the risk for their race. No matter what the reason was, this kind of action made the Sunils feel very excited. The mercenaries whispered to each other and became curious about Han Zhao's team. "What kind of mercenary group are they?" "I think they're called Black Star. Never heard of them. They must be newbies. Why bother? It would be a loss if they died." Not long after, a new mission popped up on the interface, Field Reconnaissance. The reward was 8,000 anus. This was a mission for the entire mercenary group, and the other players had also triggered it. Han Xiaoxin was very satisfied. In the mercenary hall in Uberli Hub, he could not accept other missions because he did not have enough credit points. Now that he was in Sunil, there was room for negotiation. This kind of private employment would not increase credit points, but the fame and reward were not small. Field reconnaissance was indeed very dangerous. Han Xiao did not plan to do it himself, but let the players do it. After all, they would not die, so he could squeeze as much as he could. It was perfect for reconnaissance. After the players completed the mission, he could get a share of the reward. The players were pleasantly surprised. Although it was safe to stay in the base, it was also very boring. With the reward as motivation, the players did not care about the dangers of field reconnaissance at all. "One more request. I personally want to join the battlefield maintenance team," Han Xiao said. "I am a mechanic, the kind that is not bad." "Battlefield maintenance?" Nivel frowned. "I feel that this job is better for me to use my abilities." Maintenance was a logistics job, and it was all done by the logisticians of the race. Letting the mercenaries participate would be a waste of manpower, which was equivalent to wasting money to hire people. Nivel did not reject immediately. The Black Star mercenary had just applied for the most dangerous mission, and the captain's request was not too much. Nivel felt that Han Xiao should be given some special privileges. Han Xiao picked up the damaged enlistee class armor and repaired it on the spot. He used all kinds of tools one after another. Sparks flew everywhere, dazzling everyone's eyes. Before anyone could react, this set of armor was already about 90% repaired. His machinery affinity was very high, and with the buff from the newly acquired ordnance engineer, his repair speed was very fast. He added in a timely manner, "Only during the rest period can your equipment be fully repaired. If it is seriously damaged, it will be very dangerous. However, I have enough strength to protect myself, so I can repair it on the battlefield to ensure your safety." "Okay, the higher-ups have given permission." Nivel asked the higher-ups and received a positive response. Field repairs required traveling to the front lines, and Han Xiao took the initiative to give up the safety of his position and take on a risk that he did not need to take on. Everyone was amazed. What kind of spirit was this? He was practically a selfless role model. There were not many good people like this in the world. Seeing this, Maple Moon could not help but recall the goal that Han Xiao had announced. She thought to herself, every main character has their own unique traits. He's a very positive character deep down. Could it be that his unique trait makes him a natural-born hero? After the mission change, the players were all pulled to do field reconnaissance lessons. They had to set off before the next attack and temporarily split up. Han Xiao did not need to shoot anymore and directly reported to the battlefield maintenance team. This was part of his plan. The mechanic class could reverse engineer the blueprints through repair and modification, but it required a large amount of experience. Han Xiao did not lack experience. As long as he had enough repair opportunities, he would be able to reverse engineer the blueprints. He valued the Misty class and NCO class armor the most. The performance of this type of armor was not bad, and it was very suitable to be sold to players on a large scale. Not only could he make a lot of money, but he could also increase the average strength of the mercenary group. In the next 2 days, the defense team continued to engage in contact battles, and a lot of their equipment was damaged. Han Xiao rushed to the defense circle and performed field repairs. He came into contact with all kinds of armor, and the progress of his derivation slowly progressed. Chapter 337. Late at night, in a forest 200 miles away from Forest City, a field reconnaissance team was fleeing in panic. They kept looking back as if there was something terrifying chasing after them. A faint rustling sound came from the forest behind them, as if something was getting closer and closer. The surrounding darkness was like an all-pervasive mercury, so they couldn't even see their own fingers in front of them. There were 3 people in this team, and they were all Sunil Supers. The captain, Fumi, said with a trembling voice, "Don't stop. Nightmares are right behind us." According to the beasts that appeared at different times, the stages of the catastrophe were divided. Nightmares were a sign of entering the middle stage. These were beasts that were active at night, and when they appeared in large numbers, the dangerous night battle would begin. The Soul Tide made all the beasts around the world go berserk, and Forest City was just one corner of it. In other places, there were countless beasts killing each other. No place was safe. One of the reasons for the beast tide was that the weak beasts instinctively felt the pressure from the overlords at the top of the food chain, so they left the territories of the stronger beasts and formed groups, causing an impact on Forest City. As the beasts were killed on a large scale, some kind of signal would be released that would attract stronger beasts. The purpose of field reconnaissance was to find out what kind of beasts were attacking and warn Forest City. This was a dangerous job because running into a group of beasts in the wild meant certain death. This field reconnaissance team had already sent the news back to their superiors, and now they were escaping to save their lives. Feeling the cold darkness right in front of them, the 3 of them had goosebumps. Fumi clenched his teeth, and regret filled his heart. This is not the first time. He had experienced 3 catastrophes, been selected for field reconnaissance 3 times, and walked the line between life and death countless times. The scars on his body were still aching, and he had had enough of such a life. In the past, when the catastrophes came, the supers who were running around actively came back to protect their race, and Fumi was the same. Now, he only felt annoyed and resistant. There would always be a time when the hot blood would slowly cool down. He kept giving without any returns, and year after year, Fumi's patience had long been exhausted. He did love his home, but it did not mean that his race had the right to use him as a tool and kidnap him for the sake of continuing his race. Fumi had long been tired of this. It was too unfair. Fumi's patience had already reached its limit. Why would the tribe ask him to sacrifice himself in such a dangerous situation? What right did the tribe have to ask him to sacrifice so much? Could it be that just because it was his own race, he had to ask for nothing in return? Why should the strong bear so much responsibility? His life as a mercenary in the galaxy had broadened his horizons, and Fumi felt that it was not worth it to risk his life for his race. Life was extremely precious, and he only had one. Many of the tribe's warriors had firm beliefs, but there were also many warriors who shared the same thoughts as him. After giving so much, he felt that he had done all he could for the tribe. If I can't survive this time, I don't care what kind of calamity it is. I will never come back. Fumi gritted his teeth. Suddenly, a whip-like tail shot out from the forest and wrapped around one of the scouts. The end of the tail was a sharp-boned spike that pierced into his abdomen. The scout roared and ignited a pugilist flame all over his body. He tore the tail apart, and the ink-black fluid splashed all over his face. His counterattack had caused the man to slow down for a moment. That moment alone determined his life and death. Walala, dozens of thorny tails shot out and wrapped around the pugilist, pulling him into the forest. Fumi hurriedly turned around and saw an even stronger pugilist flame erupting in the forest, setting off a strong gust of wind, showing that the pugilist had reached grade C in strength. However, this momentum only lasted for half a second before the flame suddenly exploded and fell apart, just like the person's body. Fumi suddenly felt a touch of warmth on his face. He reached out and touched it. It was his comrade's hot blood. In less than a second, a grade C pugilist was torn apart. The nightingale's cold hissing echoed in the forest, not only behind them, but also in front of them, surrounding them. Many whip-like black shadows swayed in the dark forest. There were more than 1,000 of them, all of which were the nightingale's tails. 2-2-2. The continuous cannon fire lit up the night. This wave of beast tide lasted for 5 hours, and the battle had reached its climax. The third defense circle was littered with the corpses of burrowing beasts. The steel defense team had been fighting for too long and had to change shifts. Everyone's armor was more or less damaged. It was nighttime. Han Shao carried a large box of maintenance tools and wandered behind the third defense circle, repairing the armor of the defense team one by one. Time was tight, and the task was heavy. After the repairs, they would enter the battle immediately. There were other battlefield maintenance teams that were also busy, but Han Zhao's skills were the best. During this time, his reputation had spread throughout the defense team. Every team hoped to meet Han Shao during maintenance. That way, they would have the best guarantee of their safety. Welding the steel plates, repairing the circuit, resetting the system, Han Zhao's maintenance actions were smooth. The battlefield maintenance team gave him an internal communication device to facilitate the assignment of tasks. After completing the maintenance of a team, a new order came out from the earpiece. B-12 Defense Team requesting emergency maintenance during wartime. B-12 was Nivel's team. When Han Shao rushed to the position, Nivel's team had not changed shifts to rest. Instead, they were fighting. This kind of wartime maintenance was the most risky. A soldier saw Han Shao and hurriedly said, "Quick, over here." Han Shao rushed over and saw Nivel lying on the ground. A beast's claw had penetrated the armor between his chest and abdomen, emitting electric sparks. His leg armor was also bitten open, and the broken pipes were exposed. The power unit had stopped working. Nivel was paralyzed on the ground, unable to get up. A group of soldiers protected him by his side. "Bastards, a bunch of rookies. Get lost. Don't leave your positions." Nivel cursed angrily and scolded the subordinates beside him. However, the soldiers did not do anything and firmly protected their commander. Because the soldiers had shrunk their formation, a small gap was exposed in this position. A small wave of drilling beasts broke through the interweaving net of firepower and rushed through this line of defense. This kind of situation required the support of the quick reaction team on standby. The reinforcements were already on the way, so there would not be any major problems. It was a normal defense change. However, in Nivel's eyes, this was definitely a failure of duty. He was furious and struggled to stand up. "Don't move." Han Shao pressed Nivel down, took out materials and tools, and started to repair. Nivel felt like Han Zhao's hand was like a mountain pressing down on his body. No matter how he struggled, he could not move. He gritted his teeth and could only give in. Faster, faster. Han Shao was expressionless. "Shut up." Sunil, defensive NCO armor, derivation progress. 27%. He had spent the most time repairing the enlisty class armor in the past few days, and he had already spent millions of experience to reverse engineer the blueprint. However, there were very few opportunities to repair the NCO class armor, so he had only derived 27% of it. However, he estimated that the NCO class armor required heavy mechanical modification as a prerequisite, so the progress would be stuck. Apart from the armor, he was also responsible for repairing some vehicles and turrets. He had also obtained the blueprint for the floating turrets. Chapter 338. While repairing, Han Shao glanced at the galactic battleships above Forest City and said, "We've been fighting for so long. Why haven't those battleships moved yet? Those are the sky barriers of the city, and they're also the strongest weapons. The beasts are still small, so it's not time to use the battleships yet," Nivel said. Han Shao changed the topic and asked, "I heard that you still have a trump card called the Commander class armor. It has extraordinary power, far more powerful than the NCO class armor you're wearing. Why haven't you used it yet?" The Commander class armor was a long time ago. When a mother planet was attacked, the manufacturing technology was lost. Now, there are only 4 damaged Commander class armors left in the warehouse. The damage rate is 70%, and there's no way to restore the technology. Nivel sighed and said, "Although the Commander class armor can be used by ordinary people, only supers can unleash its strongest power. When our mother planet was attacked, we sent out all the Commander class armors to fight back. They were damaged one after another, and the users died one after another. If not for their sacrifice, less than half of the population would have survived. In the end, we only managed to collect 4 damaged Commander class armors, full of battle scars. These 4 armors were the greatest contributors to protecting our race." The Commander class armor was completely different from the enlistee class armor and the NCO class armor. The latter two were standard equipment, but the Commander class armor was equivalent to top-grade equipment, elite equipment, and supers equipment. The resources used to produce one Commander class armor could be used to produce hundreds of enlistee class armors. The loss of the Commander class armor was equivalent to the loss of a top-grade force. If they had the Commander class armor technology, they could mass-produce top-grade soldiers to deal with dangerous beasts. The threat level of the catastrophe would be reduced by at least 1 level. Boom! The ground suddenly shook, and 2 armored soldiers flew out from the side. Nivel could see behind Han Shao. His eyes widened, and he roared, "Get out of the way!" An earth-drilling beast the size of a bull knocked the soldiers aside and headed straight for him. There were many types of earth-drilling beasts. This type of earth-drilling beast was good at charging, and its defense was very strong. Its black shell was like a steel plate, and it could withstand the focus fire of defensive machine guns. Ux! Han Shao turned around, and a small golden ball slid out of his sleeves. It instantly expanded and transformed into Garrett's Wrath. Without saying a word, he immediately used Flaming Will and several burst skills, even triggering true damage. A dazzling beam of light shot out and pierced through the body of the armored beast, leaving a burn mark on its body from its mouth to its anus. The armored beast, which the defense team had to spend more than 10 seconds to kill, fell to the ground with a loud bang. It had been killed in 1 shot. Under the influence of its habitual nature, the corpse slowly slid to the side of Han Zhao's feet and spilled a pool of tissue fluid. "Don't make a fuss. I'm better at fighting than you guys." Han Shao put away his weapon and continued to repair it, as if it was just a casual thing. "I forgot." Nivel opened his mouth. He had subconsciously thought of Han Shao as a logistician with no combat ability. Only then did he remember that Han Shao was a super. Very soon, Han Shao put down his tools and said, "It's fixed." The armor was operating normally. Nivel immediately stood up and confirmed that there were no malfunctions. He directly picked up the machine gun and returned to the battle group. He scolded his subordinates and ordered them to leave their posts. Although they were scolded, these soldiers did not feel disgusted at all. Instead, they were happy that they had saved their superior's life. Nivel stopped scolding after a while and focused on dealing with the enemy. He continued to loudly command the troops. Han Shao was about to head to the next repair location when a piercing alarm sounded in the base. He paused and narrowed his eyes. Level 2 alert. The catastrophe has entered the middle stage. A strange coldness spread out, and a group of black shadows flew out of the forest. Their bodies were wrapped in black fog, and they flew at a low altitude. They were only a few meters above the ground, avoiding the minefields. Furthermore, they were extremely fast and agile in the air, twisting and turning, and they actually dodged many long-range artillery attacks. The creature's appearance was very eye-catching. The light of the fire illuminated the appearance of this creature. Its whole body was black and bald. It had no hair, a standing torso, and a height of 3 to 4 meters. Its face had no facial features, and it had a pair of curved antennae. It could sense the environment through the antennae. It had 4 curved claws, a pair of strong, anti-jointed beast legs, a pair of dark red bat wings on its back, and 3 whip-like thorny tails. It was extremely ferocious. Nightmares, Han Shao thought to himself. He recognized this beast that appeared in the illustration handbook. It meant that the catastrophe had passed the early stage and finally entered the middle stage. The scale of the early stage was already so large. The Sunil said that the middle and end stages were dozens of times more dangerous than the early stage. The real large-scale casualties would only occur after the early stage. The retreat order of the logisticians came from the earpiece. All field maintenance personnel return to the 5th Defense Circle and enter the fortress. Han Shao naturally followed the order and walked into the metal fortress with a large group of logisticians. The doors and windows were all locked, and there were no exits. This was a protective measure. They could only see the battle outside from the windows. All of a sudden, the defensive circles activated their powerful high beams. Countless beams of light shot up into the sky, and the night was suddenly as bright as day. The approaching nightingale let out a shrill cry. It was flying well, but when the strong light swept over, it swayed like a drunkard and knocked into other nightingales. It rolled and fell to the ground. Many nightingales fell into the minefield and were blasted into pieces. The antennae of the nightmares were very sensitive to light. They only moved in the dark, and once they came into contact with strong light, they would be like human eyes that were stained with wind oil. The Sunils had come up with all kinds of measures to deal with dangerous beasts. In the middle stage of the catastrophe, it was no longer as simple as shooting cannons. Instead, according to the types of beasts in the beast tide, they used all kinds of measures to deal with the beasts. These measures were learned from the lessons of blood, and they could reduce the casualties to a certain extent. After all, there were many enemies that could not be dealt with by normal means, such as the poisonous insects that covered the sky. This was a sign that they had entered the last stage. Every Nightmares had the combat power of a grade B super. They were very agile, and their tails could easily penetrate armor. Wherever they passed, many floating cannons were destroyed. The defense team and mercenaries were instantly caught in a tough battle, and the casualties were increasing. The battle continued until dawn, and the remaining Nightmares finally retreated, ushering in a long time of peace. At least 1,000 soldiers had died that night. This was the battle with the heaviest losses since the start of the catastrophe. Countless corpses were put into body bags and transported back to the rear. Many of the soldiers' families lived in the city. Other than being driven by the sense of mission of the race, they also fought to protect their families in the city. Their corpses would be claimed by their families, and from time to time, loud cries could be heard in the corpse identification area. Their comrades who were still alive the day before had become incomplete corpses after one night. The atmosphere in the base was extremely gloomy. The soldiers who had gone through a night of intense battle were extremely tired, and their brains were numb. They could not take off their armor because of the emergency battle, so they sat on the ground in groups of 2 or 3, staring in a certain direction. Their eyes were not focused, and they just stood there in a daze. Only the scene of their loved ones being separated by life and death could make these soldiers' eyes ripple slightly. Many of them thought that they might also be stuffed into a body bag one day. When they thought of the heartbroken expressions of their loved ones, they could not help but feel dejected and sorrowful. Affected by such an atmosphere, even the rude mercenaries did not dare to be rash. They remained silent and quietly organized their equipment. This scene made Han Xiao think of Blue Star. No matter where in the galaxy, the pain brought by war was the same. Suddenly, there was a commotion nearby. A large group of wild teams returned after changing shifts, and the leader seemed to be very famous among the Senils. Wherever he passed, many soldiers looked at him, and some even stood up to salute him. The wild teams had a reasonable rotation system. When the people on the shift were in place, the previous batch could come back to rest. The players were part of the rotation to take over this batch of wild teams. Han Xiao thought back. When he was chatting with Lurden before, he seemed to have mentioned that there were two strongest people in the Sunil race who had reached grade B. They were mercenaries in the galaxy, and they paid a huge amount of money every year. They were the idols of the entire race. At this time, the leader at the front of the returning wild team was one of the two grade B mercenaries, Furnace. The upper echelons of the Sunil military all showed up to welcome this group of people back. Furnace waved his hand and said with a deep voice, "We are missing a lot of brothers. We have brought back some of the bodies that we could find." The crowd separated, and more than 20 body bags were carried out, revealing the faces of the bodies. They were all supers of the Sunil race, and Fumi was among them. Han Xiao glanced around and did not see Lurden's body. He looked up and saw that Lurden was standing in the team. Although he had lost 2 arms and 1 leg, he could still breathe. The upper echelons of the military said, with a serious expression, "We will take care of their funeral." "That better be the case," Furnace said calmly. This group of supers of the Sunil race looked at the bodies of their comrades and showed a sad expression. The scene was filled with grief, and the Sunil soldiers lowered their heads to remember their heroes. Han Xiao had been observing this group of supers and noticed a slight difference. This group of people represented by Lurden only had grief on their faces and silently missed their comrades. Chapter 339. The returning field troops were disbanded to rest. Lurden hopped on 1 leg and was about to find a doctor to fix it. Han Xiao whistled and signaled for Lurden to come over. "It's you. You're still alive." Lurden hopped in front of Han Xiao. "I should be the one asking you that." Han Xiao glanced at his broken limb. "I was in danger a few times and almost died," Lurden said casually. Although he was not very close to Han Xiao, seeing that someone who could be considered a friend was still alive, Lurden's face relaxed a little. Han Xiao raised the toolbox in his hand and said, "You seem to need a good mechanic. Is it free this time?" Lurden raised his eyebrows. Han Xiao rolled his eyes and said, "Buy me a drink at the same bar as last time." This was the catastrophe period, so there was time to rest. Seeing that the Black Star mercenary had volunteered to be a field scout, the officer gave Han Xiao the privilege of entering the city again. Lurden had a spare prosthetic arm, so Han Xiao quickly fixed it for him. Originally, Lurden only had his right hand, but now that it was broken, he did not care about it. He looked calm and did not care about losing his only remaining right hand. The two entered the city and went to Herlu's bar according to Han Xiao's instructions. There were many customers drinking today, all of them civilians nearby. The soldiers outside the city were killing each other, so most civilians were hiding in their homes or emergency shelters set up by the government. A few people chose to use alcohol to drive away their fear. 90% of the shops in the city were closed during the catastrophe, but Herlu's bar was still open, so there were many customers, and it was a little noisy. "Come to the bar counter," Han Xiao said. "2 glasses of your signature." "1." Lurden interrupted. Herlu's looked up drunkenly and saw Han Xiao's face clearly. His expression changed. "It's you again." He had an impression of Han Xiao, a weirdo who came looking for his brother's notes and seemed to know his secret. "What do you want now?" Han Xiao smiled. "Just a drink." Herlu stared at Han Xiao for a long time before reluctantly taking out a bottle of wine. Han Xiao didn't talk to him anymore. He drank and chatted casually with Lurden. Seeing this, Herlu put away his doubts and turned to greet the other guests. He pricked up his ears to eavesdrop on the conversation between Han Xiao and Lurden. Han Xiao glanced at Lurden's broken arm and said, "Don't you feel pain?" Lurden shook his head. "When I was in the biomass gear, I asked the doctor to cut off my sensory nerves. Injuries won't affect my combat ability. You are a metahuman. Biomass gear will weaken your abilities. Why did you go for it?" Lurden pursed his lips and said calmly, "So be it. You can live longer this way. Dead people are useless. You chose to wear biomass gear in order to live longer, and you even took the initiative to carry out the most dangerous field combat missions. You really do love your race deeply." Han Xiao raised his eyebrows and said, "No one is born to be a hero. You Senile supers seem to be too selfless. You must have your own reasons. Why don't you tell me? I'm quite curious." Lurden was silent. There was reminiscence in his eyes, and there was some fluctuation in his tone, as if he couldn't calm down when he thought about the past. He slowly said, "Just like all the other Seniles, I used to have a perfect family. My father was strict, my mother was kind, and I had 2 sisters. When Darkstar attacked, I was still a child. Even now, I still remember the laser cannons falling from the sky, thick like a waterfall. The most magnificent building in the city center turned into ashes instantly. We joined the fleeing crowd, and the military soldiers protected us. They knew that they would die if they stayed behind, but they still prioritized escorting us out. Unfortunately, my family didn't make it to Ghidorah's rescue ship. They died on the way. A laser turned my parents into ashes. I was just a child who broke down in fear. All I knew was to cry, follow the refugees, and move forward numbly. Every day, the military would give very little food to the refugees. I was so hungry that I couldn't control myself at all. After I received the food, I would secretly hide most of it and only give a small amount to my sisters. At that time, I only wanted to live, and I didn't know how to think about anything else. Then my 2 sisters starved to death." Lurden paused and said in a low voice, "I still remember the look on their faces when they died. Their bony hands grabbed my clothes, and they stared at me as if they were saying that they were hungry, but they didn't have the strength to speak. Those 2 pairs of desperate eyes were engraved in my eyes. My mind went blank, and a few seconds felt like a century. When their hands fell off, I finally dared to breathe. At that time, I was scared. I couldn't believe what I had done. If I had given the food to my sisters, even if I was a little hungry, we could have survived. But I didn't know anything at that time. I only thought that if I ate less, I would starve to death the next day. I numbly followed the crowd to board the rescue ship, not knowing where to go from here. Back then, there were many children who had lost their families like me, and they were all raised by the disabled veterans. A group of children and I were given to a veteran and lived with him from then on. He raised us and taught us how to fight. He was a rough person and impatient, but he was a good person and a good soldier. Many of us supers were orphans who were raised by the race back then. I gradually regarded that veteran as my adoptive father, but there was always a thorn in my heart. I felt that my past was too dark, and I always thought that I was a bad person. If I told my adoptive father, would he chase me away? One day, I was impulsive and told him that I'd kill my sister. He scolded me, not because of my selfishness, but because I should have saved the time to train instead of reminiscing about the past. He said that the race was now on the verge of destruction, and there was no time to be tied down by the past. Even if I was an unforgivable thug, as long as I picked up a gun to protect the race, I only had one identity, a warrior. No one cared about my past. They only cared about what I could do. Han Xiao touched his chin. What about that veteran? The first time the catastrophe came, the disabled soldier could have been protected, but he volunteered to go to the battlefield. Then he died. I later found out that he belonged to the group that protected us refugees, and I used to receive food from him. Then I became a mercenary. Lurden shook his head. The race has done me a great favor, so now I will contribute as much as I can. So, your contribution is mainly to repay the favor. Han Xiao turned around and glanced at Haluz, who was eavesdropping. Haluz was expressionless. He slammed the empty bottle on the table and walked away impatiently, as if he could not be bothered to listen to this conversation. Not entirely. It's also for the continuation of the race. The sadness of losing his comrade this morning was diluted by the occasional talk. Lurden also wanted to know more about Han Xiao, so he changed the topic. Let's not talk about me. Let's talk about you. You. This time, Han Xiao suddenly stood up and interrupted. Sorry, I have some personal matters to attend to, so I'll leave for a while. Lurden was speechless. Shouldn't you return the favor when making friends? Why did you leave after hearing my story? I feel like I was taken advantage of. Han Xiao walked to the side, found Haluz, and said, I want to talk to you alone. Haluz immediately became alert. What is your purpose? Han Xiao went straight to the point this time. I know a lot about you, such as your strength, the legacy your brother left for you, and so on. Maybe you're interested to hear about the future of the Sunil race. Future? This word surprised Haluz, and he was even more confused about Han Xiao's purpose. He asked in confusion, Who are you? I'm a foreseer, or you can call me a prophet. Han Xiao smiled weirdly. The reason he contacted Haluz so many times was because he knew Haluz's hidden identity. This guy was the main character of the Sunil race. Chapter 340. Foreseer. Haluz had a suspicious look on his face. Suddenly, a stranger came to him without warning and said that he could foresee the future. He had never seen this before. What the hell? Haluz was skeptical. His first reaction was disbelief. With a playful expression, he said, You can foresee the future. Then, do you know what I'm going to eat tomorrow? It's fine if you don't believe my identity. Just listen. Time will tell if I'm right. Han Xiao ignored Haluz's teasing and started his own performance. He pretended to be profound and said in a voice that only the two of them could hear, The conflict has already begun. Contradictions have already appeared. It won't be long before the guardian gods of your race split. From then on, the dream of Sunil's revival will be shattered forever. The catastrophe will exhaust your resources and hope, and you can only seek help. From then on, you will walk the path of vassals, becoming a vassal race of other advanced civilizations. Your people were scattered to different cities to live, and your unity gradually disappeared. You struggled at death's door, relying on the strong, and slowly losing your heritage and spirit. Your past became words, recorded in the textbooks and history books of the higher civilizations. Your descendants could only understand the history of your race through words, becoming another withered race in the vast universe. He purposely used ambiguous words. The purpose of a prediction was to give people a vague and hazy feeling. When it really happened, they would feel enlightened or regretful when they recalled the prediction. Han Xiao naturally understood the future of Sunil. This race would not be destroyed physically, but it was another form of destruction. Spirit, culture, thoughts, history. These were the foundation of a race's evolution from ignorance to wisdom. Thinking through the development process, they would come up with answers that belonged to the race itself. These things that could not be seen or touched allowed a race to be called a civilization. They were like the foundation of a building, the resonance of all the members of a race, the pillars that supported the unity of the race. Beasts were also divided into different races, but no one had ever called them a civilization. The Sunil race was a civilization that had fallen on hard times, and the supers were their guardians. The race was grateful for their contributions, but they did not have the extra resources to reward them. They had to rely on the supers to recover their vitality. However, it was the endless contributions that caused the conflicts to gradually surface. In Han Zhao's previous life, some of the supers could not hold it in anymore. They felt that they had done enough and chose to abandon their country and home in search of freedom. They abandoned the race that they saw as a burden and indulged in sex and space, seeing it as their new home. The Sunil race had suffered a huge blow. Originally, every time they went through a catastrophe, the losses were still acceptable. The race's strength was still slowly recovering, and the upper echelons were looking forward to the day when the hard times were over. However, when the guardian of the race split up, their situation took a dive. The losses from the catastrophes started to exceed the accumulation of the race, and it became harder and harder for them. Sunil did not have enough resources to migrate, so they could only ask for help. However, even if they had enough resources, they would not do so. There were all kinds of evil organizations circling the galaxy, and the fallen civilizations were delicious prey. After leaving Ghidorah's protection, greater dangers would follow, such as large-scale scavengers, slave traders, and so on. There were many examples like this. Slave traders with strong backing would exterminate an entire race, leaving only a certain number of individuals, and using the reason of extinct species as a reason to increase the price. There were also cases of evil factions exterminating races to complete some kind of ritual or simply to obtain satisfaction. Order maintained the basic balance of the universe, but it could not expel all evil. In the end, the Sunil race accepted Ghidorah's military aid and migrated again. Ghidorah scattered the Sunil race and sent long-term garrison troops to protect them. As Ghidorah implemented various targeted strategies and the effects of time, the Sunil race was assimilated and the Sunil civilization was destroyed. The three universal civilizations had an agreement to not invade low-level civilizations, but the war never ended. It was just that there was no smoke. The carnival, bustling, and orderly universe was just the surface. Hidden in the dark were the ambitions of various civilizations. Every civilization had the dream of becoming the overlord. Since they were not allowed to use war to conquer low-level civilizations, they would assimilate them. Even the civilizations of a lawful faction were not kind people. Even Ghidorah, which worshipped the pure-blooded theory, would cultivate vassal races. The rise and fall of your civilization was your own business. You wanted to continue your race, but others did not care and would take the opportunity to take advantage of you. Every day, a race or civilization would be destroyed in some corner of the universe. So what if you were one more? At most, they would send someone to record the history of the race, and it would become a topic of conversation or a dispensable record. Some galactic shows like to report on the plight of civilizations, and the selling point was to make the audience resonate and sympathize with them. However, expecting people to put their sympathy into action was a very slim hope. Individuals had emotions and would sometimes make emotional decisions, but when it came to a civilization and a race, only benefits were eternal. In the end, the Sunil race was just one of the thousands of normal civilizations and did not have the right to be treated specially. Furthermore, this was the Shattered Star Ring, the edge of the visible universe. It was remote and uncivilized, and the active people were scavengers, abandoned people, mercenaries, and so on. Furthermore, Darkstar attacked the low-level civilizations to make them exhaust Ghidorah's resources. If a civilization in distress could leave Ghidorah and become independent and recover their strength, Darkstar would not sit still and watch a Ghidorah ally be born. Han Shao told Haluz all this in vague terms, letting him understand that the future of the Sunil race was bleak. Why are you telling me something like this? Do you think I'm interested? Haluz casually raised his head and drank a mouthful of wine. He looked like a drunkard who did not care if the world ended tomorrow. He could drink today and get drunk tomorrow. Because I saw your ending. A lot of things can be avoided. Han Shao smiled. Haluz put down the wine glass and curiously asked, "What's my ending?" Although he did not believe that Han Shao was a prophet, most people would be curious about their own future. Han Shao had made a lot of sense just now, so Haluz really wanted to know how this guy would predict his fate. Han Shao stopped, smiled, and said, "When you believe that I'm a prophet, I'll tell you. I already believe it." Haluz quickly changed his words. "If you really believe it, I welcome you to come find me in the future." Han Shao smiled. Shamelessness did not work on him. Haluz was the main character of the Sunil race's storyline. According to this person's experience, Han Shao felt that there was a chance that he could abduct this main character. Haluz was still a drunkard who wanted to escape from reality, so he could not afford to be the main character of the storyline. His part had not started yet. Han Technician had purposely done this to target the changes in Haluz's future and leave a deep impression. Han Xiao could not only have himself as the only NPC in his faction. He had to expand the number of officers, and Herluz was the first target. At this time, an argument suddenly sounded in the corner of the bar. One of them had a big belly and was obviously drunk. He had a conflict with the drinking buddy next to him. They seemed to be talking about the survival of the race and had different opinions. Chapter 341. On the other side, a drunkard with a big belly waved his beer bottle and yelled, "Then go beg Ghidorah. What's the use of race honor? Only survival is important." The brains of those leaders are filled with sh*t. So many people die every single time, and both of my younger brothers have died in battle. All of their persistence is futile. They could have obtained the help of Ghidorah. So why do they have to force themselves? Those supers are useless. If they really had the ability, they would have solved the catastrophe long ago. The drunkard had a look of disgust on his face, and his tone was agitated. He felt that the supers and the army were too weak, and his words were getting worse and worse. His behavior of picking up his bowl to eat meat and putting down his chopsticks to curse angered the other customers. The supers and the army were heroes in the eyes of most civilians. Any questioning or insulting would anger the public. A few customers immediately spoke up. Everything you're enjoying now is the result of the heroes risking their lives. What right do you have to criticize us? The drunkard snorted. This is what they should do. Those with ability have to take more responsibility. If not for the race's nurturing, they would just be ordinary people like me. People like you are disgusting. You should be sent out of the city to fend for yourself. The drunkard snorted. Even if the city is lost, I'm still a civilian who has priority. Anyway, I'm not the one who dies. You don't deserve protection. The crowd was even angrier. The quarrel became more and more intense. Lurden, who was beside the bar, was expressionless as if he did not hear anything. He did not even bother to turn around. At this time, a very young man looked angry and rushed forward impulsively. He directly used his hands and wrestled with the drunkard. His strong body pressed the drunkard under his body and continuously punched the drunkard's face. Blood splattered everywhere. When the others saw the blood spurting out, they hurriedly tried to pull the impulsive young man away. "Lana, calm down. Stop fighting. He'll die if you continue." Lana added a few more punches before he stood up angrily. After being pulled to the side, the drunkard was bleeding from his mouth and nose. He could not stand up anymore. The other customers surrounded him to check. Luckily, the drunkard was only injured. Immediately, some people complained that Lana was too heavy-handed. Lana lived nearby, and many people here were his neighbors. He was a young man who wanted to join the army. He was strong, and he was a supporter of the army. Herluz yelled, "Both of you get out of my shop. Go home and calm down." Lana left with an indignant expression, and the drunkard was also dragged out. This little farce was over. Han Xiao turned to Herluz and said, "I'm Black Star. If you're interested in what I have to say, come find me. I can solve this problem." After that, Han Xiao called out to Lurton, and the two left the bar. Herluz's nonchalant expression slowly disappeared. His expression darkened, and his eyes flickered. He was not as unconcerned about the future of his race as he pretended to be. Herluz did not know if this mercenary who called himself Black Star was a real foreseer. Even if he was, he could have purposely made up a prophecy to lure Herluz into a trap. Anyone who took action had a motive, but Herluz did not understand the other party's goal. Could it be that he was the target? The door of the bar was pushed open again. A burly man wearing a hood walked to the bar and said with a deep voice, "Give me a drink." The hooded man looked up and showed his face. "Furnace." Herluz was shocked and said, "You never drink. Just treat it as a celebration for me coming back alive." Furnace picked up Herluz's bottle and took a sip. The two of them acted very close. If others knew that the strongest grade B super of their race was so close to a small bar owner, they would definitely be very shocked. The two of them were childhood playmates, and Herluz was too familiar with this childhood friend of his. Almost all positive and positive adjectives could be used on Furnace: brave, righteous, and responsible. After the disaster on Senil, Furness became a mercenary and contributed to the race. Haluz had actually always been jealous of Furness. His short-lived brother, Delvis, had always talked about Furness next door. In his eyes, Furness was someone else's child. Although he was a little jealous, Haluz also secretly respected Furness. If he asked himself honestly, he felt that he would definitely not have the same dedication as Furness. After his brother passed away, Haluz had been living a drunken life, eating and waiting for death, not caring about the survival state of his race at all. He knew that he was a lazy person. When his brother was still alive, he always hated him for not living up to expectations. Many people felt that his talent was about the same as Furness, but he had been wasting his time. Now, Furness was the guardian of the entire race, and he was just a nameless person. He understood Furness. This was a very disciplined person and would not make an exception for no reason. Haluz frowned and said, "What's wrong with you?" Furness smiled faintly, full of bitterness. Haluz had never seen such an expression on this determined face of his. He softly said, "Brother, I can't hold on anymore. I'm going to leave." "Leave?" Haluz was surprised. Furness slowly said, "There are endless possibilities in the galaxy. Only by cutting off the past can we move forward. I don't want to be tied down by the race anymore. There are many warriors who think the same as me. After this catastrophe, we will never come back. We have protected the race for long enough. Many friends have sacrificed themselves, and some people have begged for our protection, but they think that it is right and proper. This is not our duty, and there is no need to continue. We have done our best. Maybe the race, accepting Ghidorah's help, is the best ending. No one will die for nothing anymore. Even you're going to give up?" Haluz was shocked. Suddenly, Han Zhao's words appeared in his mind. Could this be the split predicted by that scammer? Then, the future of the race would be like what he said, becoming dependent on Ghidorah and losing their inheritance? Haluz thought for a while and told him the result of Han Zhao's prediction of Sunil accepting military aid. After Furness heard it, his eyes did not change at all. He shook his head and said, "Being alive is the most important. As long as one is alive, one will not die." "Is that really so? But the Furness I know will never abandon the race." "You are still alive, but you have changed." Seeing Furness's expression, Haluz knew that he had made up his mind and would not be convinced. He had mixed feelings. He had always regarded Furness as his greatest and most upright friend, but now he could no longer look at this childhood friend with the same eyes. It was as if he had become a stranger. "Then, why did you come to me to tell me this?" Haluz asked. Furness shook the bottle and said softly, "To be honest, I hate you a lot. You clearly have more power than me, but you hide in the back and accept our protection. Forget it. Let's not talk about this anymore. I just came to inform you. It's up to you whether you continue to hide or stand out." Furness pulled down his hood, turned around, and left. Haluz had mixed feelings. The seeds had been planted, so Han Zhao did not enter the city again. He stayed outside the city and continued his field maintenance work. In the middle of the catastrophe, the battle became more and more intense. All kinds of terrifying monsters took turns to fight. He did not continue to use his physical body to travel through the battlefield, but put on the Amphiptera mechanical suit. Sometimes, the maintenance area would be breached by the beasts, and he had no choice but to help and fill in the gaps. Among the mercenaries, his strength was not very eye-catching. The only reason the other mercenaries remembered him was that the Black Star mercenary took the initiative to take on the field reconnaissance mission. Many mercenaries felt that Han Zhao was crazy, and when the next field patrol took over, the mercenary group would definitely suffer heavy losses. A large number of soldiers died every day, and the mutilated bodies were transported back to the back for people to claim. Many weapons and vehicles in the defense circle were damaged, and it became more and more difficult to defend. Only the 9 battleships in the sky did not move and did not fire. Sunil had limited resources, and battleship energy was scarce. Only at the end of the catastrophe would the battleships join the battle when the truly powerful monsters appeared. Furthermore, the interstellar battleships built by Sunil could only fly around the surface of the planet for 3 to 4 days at most before their energy dropped to the warning line. Other than guarding the sky, the main purpose of the 9 battleships was to ensure that the civilians could be transported away when the situation was critical, giving up on the main city and escaping. 7 or 8 days later, the city entered a strange safe period. The alarm that represented the end of the catastrophe sounded again. This time, everyone was given a breathing mask. Not only the logisticians, even some supers entered the facilities to take refuge. Buzz! Buzz! Chapter 342. Whoosh! Within the defensive perimeter, some sort of device spewed out a purplish-red biochemical gas that enveloped the entire area. To deal with such a large number of small insects, using a toxic gas attack was the best method. This type of specially developed toxic gas was very lethal. Even the flying insects that could withstand fire would fall to the ground after a few seconds, struggling to die. However, at this time, thunderous beast roars sounded. Large beasts with an average size of more than 10 meters charged over together with a swarm of insects. The strength of the beast horde at the end was far greater than the previous 2 stages. These beasts were all at the top of the food chain on planet Sunil. There were bone armor war elephants that were dozens of meters tall, sulfur flame winged pythons that could spit fire, and so on. A defense team needed to spend at least 20 seconds to kill one beast. The poison gas covered the entire area. This was a weapon to kill the insects, but it was also a double-edged sword. If the soldier's armor was torn apart by the beasts, they would also be affected if exposed to the poison gas. Even if every soldier's armor was equipped with an antidote, it could only slightly delay the poison's effect. It would not be fatal, but it would temporarily paralyze them. Sunil's technology could not develop a genetic poison gas that only worked on insects, so they could only use strong biochemical gas. The poison gas was a way to hurt both sides, but it was also the only way to deal with the insects. A swarm of insects could suck a Sunil dry in half a second. That definitely could not let the insects enter the city, or it would be a terrible disaster. They had to stop them from entering the city, no matter the cost. At the end of the catastrophe, everyone had to fight in the poison gas, and the conditions were even worse. The 2 outermost lines of defense were almost half destroyed after the previous 2 stages. This was also the disadvantage of the Sunils. The beast horde approached the defense team's position despite the cannon fire. The ground shook violently as a bone armor war elephant charged at the B-12 defense team in a crushing manner. The pressure from its enormous size made Neville's steel-like mind tense up involuntarily. At this moment, a large ball of light, flashing with electric light, fell from the sky. It was too fast, and the ball of light was streamlined, exploding half of the bone armor war elephant's body. Blood and flesh splattered everywhere. Neville raised his head to look. This ball of light left a dazzling zigzag electric trail in the air, crossing the sky and connecting with the battleship in the sky. The 9 battleships in the sky, which had been idle for half a month, finally opened fire. Electromagnetic railguns surged with blue light, shooting out bullets entwined with electric light. They targeted the large beasts to attack, immediately reducing the pressure on the ground. A fierce battle ensued. Cannon fire and lightning flashed across the entire battlefield, deafening everyone's ears. The beast tide was endless, and the stench of blood was extremely pungent. The defense team fired wildly, and the light from the fire illuminated the corpses of the beasts and soldiers on the ground time and time again. The losses were heavy. Crack! At the base of the B-12 defense team, a pure purple thunder leopard that was more than 10 meters in size moved quickly like a flash of purple lightning. With one claw, it cut open the armor of the soldiers, and even the soldiers inside were cut in half. Neville turned a blind eye and ordered his subordinates to focus fire. There were only 12 of his subordinates left, and more than half of them were injured. "Don't be shaken. Hold the position." Neville's tone was cold and hard. Countless bullets penetrated the thick skin of the thunder leopard, and blood splattered everywhere. The thunder leopard roared and pounced, killing all the soldiers. Only Nivell was left. The Thunder Leopard's life force was still very strong. Far away in the city, the countless fresh life forces were like freshly baked bread. This Thunder Leopard's bloodthirsty genes began to stir. Just as the Thunder Leopard was about to cross the defense line, Nivell immediately blocked in front. The defense machine gun swept, and after witnessing the scene of the Thunder Leopard easily killing the soldiers, he knew that he was not a match for it. However, he still blocked the Thunder Leopard without hesitation. The responsibility of the defense team was deeply ingrained in his bones. He would not allow any beast to cross the defense line that he was in charge of. As long as there were no orders from above, he would not retreat. The Thunder Leopard roared and pounced fiercely. Nivell controlled the NCO-class armor to fight with it. He rolled and dodged, leaving wounds on the Thunder Leopard's body. He slid past the Thunder Leopard's abdomen and dodged a claw attack. Just as he was about to get up, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his left arm. The Thunder Leopard had turned its head at a strange angle and bit through his arm armor. The poisonous gas poured in through the hole, and Nivell felt a piercing pain on his skin. It quickly turned into the numbness of being poisoned. He immediately held his breath and injected an antidote into his waist. A burning sensation flowed through his body. After injecting the antidote, the effect time has been extended to about 2 minutes. If I hold my breath, I should be able to hold on for another 10 seconds. I have to kill this beast during this time. Nivell's expression was cold. Even if he was poisoned, blocking the enemy was his top priority. He had already disregarded life and death. One man and one beast fought fiercely. Nivell abandoned the heavy defense machine gun and used the wrist saw and the armor's guns and rockets to fight. After dozens of seconds of fierce fighting, both sides were covered in wounds. Nivell began to feel his body stiffen and his head become dizzy. The double effects of excessive blood loss and poisoning began to take effect. Nivell suddenly stood still and did not move. The Thunder Leopard pounced over, but he did not dodge at all. He allowed himself to be pinned under the Thunder Leopard's body. Its claws pierced through his chest and abdomen. Puff! Blood flowed out from his mouth. Nivell endured the pain and stabbed one hand into the Thunder Leopard's neck. He used his other hand to firmly hang on to the Thunder Leopard's body. He used his other hand to stab into the Thunder Leopard's mouth and fired wildly. He knew that his movements were slow, so he used himself as bait and risked his life. The Thunder Leopard was in so much pain that it twisted. It bit off the arm that was in its mouth and smashed down with its claws like a madman. Nivell was seriously injured and could not move. He watched the huge claws grow larger and larger in his vision, but he was very calm. This day has finally come for me. Just as the claws were about to slam down, Nivell saw a huge flash of lightning descend. It was extremely dazzling. Immediately after, Nivell and the Thunder Leopard were both covered by the light of the railgun. The tragic battle ended. On the first day of the last phase of the catastrophe, there were heavy casualties. Dozens of fighter jets crashed, and even 2 battleships' energy shields were almost shattered by a group of super-large flying beasts. The energy was severely depleted. What a terrifying battle. This is the first time I've seen such a big battle. I won't accept any more large-scale missions in the future. The mercenaries who participated in the battle were panting heavily. Many of their colleagues' corpses were lying on the ground. Han Shao started to repair the armor one by one. He did not need to directly participate in the battle. In such a dangerous situation, he did not have the confidence to come out unscathed. He did not want to take the risk of coming out unscathed. He was here to earn a commission and help out with his ability. He would not risk his life for other forces just for a little bit of money. During this rare, empty period, another batch of wild troops returned. All the players were back, and everyone looked very relaxed. It was as if they were not on a dangerous mission, but on a field trip. Moving around in a dangerous area was not a psychological burden to the players at all. After all, they would revive. Although there was a limit to the number of times they could revive, this group of people were mostly professional players, so they naturally knew how to control the number of times they died. Now that they were all at the max level, losing a little experience was nothing. After all, they could make up for it with the mission rewards. Furthermore, earning universal currency was more useful. On this side, Black Star's group gathered, and the surrounding mercenaries immediately noticed them. After sizing them up, shock appeared on their faces. Those people don't seem to be missing. What, all of them are alive? The mercenaries were shocked and very curious. They hurriedly asked the other wild team members and got the answer that this group of people could revive. Their faces instantly turned into envy and fear. In the universe, undying supers were the most difficult enemies to deal with. No one dared to underestimate them. This mercenary group is full of undying people. Incredible. This group of mercenaries all remember the name of the Black Star Mercenary Group. A mercenary group whose members could not die, in their professional eyes, would become extremely popular in no time. The name of the Black Star Mercenary was reported to the upper echelons of the military, and the upper echelons took it very seriously. Undying scouts were the most suitable for reconnaissance, and they could greatly reduce the losses of the wild troops. For this reason, the military general personally looked for Han Shao. His attitude was very sincere, and his attitude was very humble. It was completely different from the attitude he had when interacting with the other mercenaries. The military expressed that they hoped that the Black Star Mercenary would not take shifts and rest, and that they would once again participate in the wild reconnaissance, saying that the Sunils needed them. Most importantly, of course, they promised to increase the reward. Such useful helpers naturally deserved better treatment. The military took the initiative to increase the reward because they were afraid that the Black Star Mercenary would reject it. The mission reward was increased to 18,000 anas, an increase of 50%. Han Shao agreed immediately, and the bitter players started a new round of reconnaissance. According to the time, this was also the last round of reconnaissance. The corpses on the battlefield were moved back for people to claim. Han Shao found that Nivel had died in battle, and he was a little sad. After all, he was an acquaintance. The family member who came to claim the body was a woman. Han Shao asked the other soldiers and found out that this woman was Nivel's wife. Nivel also had a child who was a few years old at home. Inside Forest City, most of the people were waiting in front of the television, watching the broadcast of the battle. At this critical moment, the media did not have any fake news. It was the most realistic battle situation. Everyone was worried that the situation could still hold on. The bar was not open. Haluz sat in the attic, watching the broadcast on the television, drinking nonstop. The tragic scenes of the battlefield flashed past, and he suddenly felt frustrated. He put down the glass heavily, left the bar, and strolled on the streets. The streets were empty, and there were no pedestrians. After walking aimlessly for a while, a small argument entered his ears. As a grade B super, although he had not fought for many years, his sharp senses would not deteriorate. Haluz suddenly thought of something and followed the sound to a house near the bar. The argument inside was getting clearer and clearer. In a few days, I'll reach the age requirement for conscription. I'm going to join the army. This voice was a little familiar, as if he had heard it somewhere before. Haluz was a little curious, so he hid and jumped onto the windowsill. He peeked through the window and realized that he had indeed seen the person talking before. It was Lana, who had caused trouble in the bar a few days ago and beaten up a drunk man. He had a passionate expression and a passionate tone. The ones arguing with Lana were his parents. They were dressed in poor clothes and were relatively low-class civilians. At this time, Lana's parents were anxious. Chapter 343. The Sunil race strongly promoted the culture of supers and the army. The concept of contribution had to be grasped from a young age. Lana had dreamed of joining the army since he was young and becoming a glorious soldier that protected the race, so he had been training hard. His neighbor happened to be a veteran, so Lana and the children around often went to ask the veteran to train them. They counted the days with their fingers, hoping that they would be old enough to join the army. The catastrophes happened once every few years, and the time between was to collect resources, build more weapons, and train a new batch of soldiers. The Sunil race usually started to recruit soldiers after the catastrophes. Although the population of Dark Star decreased by 90% after the catastrophes, it was still crowded in a big city. There were two ways to recruit soldiers. One was to join the army voluntarily, which was needless to say, and the other was compulsory recruitment. The targets were prisoners and families with many children. Furthermore, all the young people of the right age had to be forced to serve for a period of time and undergo basic soldier training. When the time came, these people could be temporarily recruited as soldiers. Of course, Lana's wish was not just to serve the army. He wanted to apply to join the army and become an official soldier, but his parents strongly rejected him. How can you say something like that? Protecting the race is glorious. Countless people have sacrificed for it. I'm also willing to sacrifice my life. This is the glory. Lana's eyes widened. Lana's parents tried to persuade him. You're still young. There are many things you don't understand. So many people join the army every year. It won't be a big deal if you're not there. No, this is shameful. My dream is to protect the race. Lana's tone was passionate. Then, have you ever thought about us? Lana's mother sobbed. You used to go to Mr. Nivell next door for training, but he died in battle yesterday. His body was moved back, broken into many pieces. You didn't see that scene. His wife cried until she fainted a few times. Only a widow and an orphan are left at home. They can only rely on pension money to survive. But she still has a child who's a few years old to raise. We're already old, and you're our only child. If you die, what should we do? How are we going to live? Lana was speechless. With a conflicted expression, he mumbled, This is not right, Lana. Be it the supers, the army, or Mr. Nivell, they're all great people, but we're just normal civilians. I love my race, and I'll work and contribute to my race. The battlefield shouldn't be a choice for us. His father placed his hands on Lana's shoulders and spoke earnestly. He respected supers and the army, and he was grateful for their contributions. However, when it was his turn, he could not make the same choice. Lana lowered his head and said nothing. His mother said anxiously, Lana, you must promise us. Don't take things too hard. I agree. Lana lowered his head and said gloomily, I will serve in the military. I won't enlist. His parents immediately heaved a sigh of relief, their faces filled with benevolence. Outside the window, Haluz leaned against the windowsill and looked up at the sky. In the sky, the enormous figures of the 9 battleships were like thick, dark clouds, blocking the sunlight that was supposed to shine into the city. The airflow created by the engines at the bottom turned into an everlasting wind. The thick smell of blood outside the city was carried into the city and almost became indiscernible. Many memories appeared in his mind one after another. Ferna's bitter smile, Lana's passion, the criticism of the drinkers, the bloody battlefield, the sacrificed soldiers, the people who worshipped him, the countless times he pulled away after sobering up, the day he guarded the bar and let himself rot slowly. There was also the Dark Star disaster that he had not thought about for a long time. That was the last time he saw his brother Delvis. In his memory, Delvis still wore thick glasses. His hair had not been taken care of for a long time, so it was messy and oily. His white lab coat was like a robe on his thin and short body, giving him a funny feeling. His figure appeared on the communication screen. Behind him was the research institute whose dome had been blown up. Delvis pushed his glasses up out of habit and said to his tall brother, Haluz, Brat, I left something for you in the research institute at home. The password to open the door is our parents' birthdays. You don't have to spend any effort to crack it. His tone was the same as usual, still exasperated, but there was a hint of reluctance. The communication ended. He looked out the window. In the direction of the Military Research Institute where Delvis worked, countless ferocious Dark Star battleships floated, and a mushroom cloud exploded on the ground. He had used the password to open Delvis Private Research Institute. Haluz had always wanted to sneak in and cause trouble, but he did not know the password. He saw the inheritance his brother had left for him. More memories surfaced in his mind. Haluz still remembered that he was just an idle gangster back then, enjoying himself everywhere with his brother's salary. He had terrifying talent and reached grade B super at a young age, thousands of times stronger than Delvis. However, he always had to lower his head in front of his brother and was often scolded and scolded. He was already dead, so he was not afraid of boiling water. Brother, Haluz whispered to himself. The memories were like bubbles. The last image that stopped was Han Zhao's deep eyes, which seemed to contain the torrent of time. Haluz calmed down a little. He returned to the bar, entered the attic, and opened a closet that had been sealed for a long time. The passageway that led to the secret basement of the bar was already covered in dust. He walked down slowly and turned on the lights. There were a bunch of boxes in the basement, many of which were Delvis's belongings. He went straight to the corner of the basement, took out a wooden box, brushed away the dust on it, and opened the lid. There was a set of dark-colored armor inside. This was the inheritance that Delvis had left for him, the armor that was secretly made for him. During the Dark Star disaster, Haluz survived with this armor and never used it again. He left it in the basement to collect dust as a memento of his brother. This might be the last piece of commander-class armor that could still be used in the entire Sunil race. Haluz stared at the armor, and his eyes sharpened. It's been too long since I fought. I hope I won't get cramps. The beasts that appeared at the end were even crazier. They were all the overlords at the top of the food chain on this planet. Some of them had already surpassed the category of beasts and could be called monsters directly. They were giant flying beetles with a wingspan of more than 100 meters. They did not die even after taking more than a dozen railguns head-on. They could spit corrosive acid from their mouths, which stuck to the battleship's shields and sizzled. One of these monsters could be easily dealt with, but when they appeared in groups, the firepower of the base gradually became less and less effective. A battleship's shield was broken, and its outer armor was damaged. What do the monsters on this planet eat to grow up? The mercenaries were shocked. What did a monster with a wingspan of more than 100 meters mean? Its size was almost the same as a small battleship of Sunil. This was just a wild animal that evolved on this planet, so there was only a very small chance that it would grow up like this. Super large monsters like this did not even need a ground reconnaissance team. The reconnaissance aircraft in the air could directly locate them. Those chimeras and galactic races were not included. The missiles continued to bombard the air, and the deafening sound was deafening. Suddenly, the alarm in the defense circle went off, and an emergency broadcast sounded. Prepare for impact. Prepare for impact. Mountain beast detected approaching, estimated to arrive in 14 minutes. All warriors, get ready. High-energy concentrated particle cannon, start charging. At the 5th defense circle, the ground cracked open, revealing an extremely large cannon made of steel with an extremely complicated structure. The barrel of the cannon was hexagonal, and it was embedded in a particle stabilizing device in the middle of the air. It was as if the barrel of the cannon was divided into sections. Han Zhao's mechanical suit immediately sent out a high-energy response alarm, and the muzzle of this huge cannon gradually lit up. This high-energy concentrated particle cannon was an obsolete product that had been shot out from the wormhole at the center of the Shattered Star Ring. It was a galactic-level war weapon that came from an unknown advanced civilization. It had been picked up by scavengers and sold. In the Sunil race had spent a huge amount of money to buy it. This was the lesson they had learned from the first catastrophe. They had to have a trump card to deal with powerful beasts. Although it was an obsolete product, it had still cost the Sunil race a huge amount of money. The technology of the advanced civilizations was kept secret, and it could not be repaired or researched. It could only be used. Every time it was fired, it would consume a huge amount of energy. The Sunil race was short on energy, and firing a cannon was equivalent to burning a huge amount of wealth. Their energy technology was naturally not as advanced as the advanced civilizations, and it required a long time to charge before firing. Only when they met the strongest monsters would they use this huge cannon. The Sunil race had explored this planet for more than a decade, and they had recorded a large number of beasts in their encyclopedia. The mountain beast was one of the top monsters, and the powerful beasts were all lured away by the field combat team. The appearance of this mountain beast undoubtedly meant that the field combat team had failed. Han Shao exclaimed in surprise and casually shot a thunder leopard that was close to him. He turned around to look at the high-energy concentrated particle cannon and felt like he was about to drool. This feeling of having butterflies in my stomach. Han Technician opened his eyes wide. Chapter 344. The ground shook. The forest in the distance collapsed, and a huge beast slowly approached. Its body was close to 200 meters long, and it was like a moving mountain. Even though they had seen the appearance of mountain beasts from the illustrated handbook, many of the mercenaries were still shocked at this moment. What a huge creature! The mountain beast had 4 hooves that were as thick as a building and a long tail that stood upright. Its body was covered in rock-like scales, and it had a thick yellow shell that looked like a tortoise shell on its back. Its head was like a shovel, and its jaw was protruding. Its eyes were hidden in the cracks of the shell, and the shape of its head gave off a ferocious feeling. However, the mountain beast was actually a gentler animal, and it liked to pretend to be a small mountain to sleep. It was affected by the soul tide that made it irritable. Adult mountain beasts were usually between 150 to 220 meters in size. Compared to them, the Sunils were like ants on the ground. The battleship in the sky fired at the mountain beast from afar. 6 to 7 electromagnetic rail guns exploded on its body, shattering a large piece of rock armor but not hurting its flesh. The mountain beast's defense was extremely strong. These few railguns angered it, and it let out a low roar like a cow. Its long tail stabbed into the ground with a bang, rolling up a large clump of soil mixed with trees. Its tail quickly tightened, and the clump of soil became much denser. Then, it swung its tail violently, and the clump of soil shot out like a cannonball. It contained the strength of a mountain beast, and its kinetic energy was extremely terrifying. Han Shao could not even see the full appearance of the flying clump of soil. He could only see a fleeting shadow. Bang! The battleship's shield flickered, and the clump of soil exploded on it. With it, as the center, chaotic electric current spread throughout the shield, and cracks quickly spread. This attack almost broke through the shield's defense. The battleship urgently increased its energy output, and the shield returned to its original state. The attack did not work, so the mountain beast roared and rolled up another clump of soil. It could still use hundreds or thousands of attacks like this, but the battleship's energy was limited. High-energy concentrated particle cannon charged. Target has entered shooting range. Countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fire. A dazzling, milky white beam of light shot out. It was at least 4 meters in diameter and crossed a few thousand meters in the blink of an eye. It easily penetrated the mountain beast's shell and shot into its abdomen, causing a chain explosion inside its body. Boom! The sound of the explosion was like an earthquake. A thick and solid beast's hoof was blasted away, and the front half of the mountain beast's body was blasted open. Blood flowed like a waterfall from the wound, and a miserable howl shook the heavens as it fell to the ground. The high-energy concentrated particle cannon was a weapon used by the battleships of a super-high civilization. Being able to heavily injure a 100-meter-long giant beast with just one shot was the trump card of the Sunil race. This scene energized the soldiers. They suppressed their fatigue and fought against the beasts. What a terrifying weapon! Han Zhao's eyes lit up as he suppressed the desire in his heart. This was a weapon that could only be grasped at a later stage, and with his current level of knowledge, he was unable to learn it. Only by continuing to grow would he have the opportunity to create such a powerful weapon. The particle cannon did not retract. Instead, it began to recharge. At this moment, the broadcast rang out once again. Not only was this mountain beast approaching, there were also 2 other powerful monsters approaching. Very soon, they appeared within their line of sight. One was a flying monster that looked like a dragon, a lava lizard. Its wingspan was 100 meters, and its scales were ferocious. This thing was much harder to deal with than the acid flying beetles of the same size. Not only was its shell tough, but it could also spit out lava. It lived in a volcanic environment. The other was a land creature, a king hunter. It looked like a tiger or a leopard, and its body was covered in armor-like scales. Its body was only about 30 meters long, but it was even more dangerous than the mountain beasts. It was agile, and its movements were as fast as lightning. Therefore, it was difficult to lock onto it, unlike the mountain beasts, which were easy targets. It could easily break through one line of defense after another, and its sharp claws could easily tear through metal. It was the biggest threat to the ground troops. The name King Hunter came from its dominance in the forest. It was the undisputed ruler of the forest on this planet. Every time it appeared, it meant that the Sunil race had to pay a heavy price to deal with it. The most dangerous time was when a king hunter almost broke through the defense circle and charged into the city. The situation took a turn for the worse. The lava lizard swooped down at high speed, and the king hunter ran as fast as lightning. There were strong enemies approaching from both the sky and the ground, and there was even an injured mountain beast that kept throwing rocks. The particle cannon slowly finished charging. It aimed at the lava lizard in the sky and fired, directly breaking one of the lava lizard's wings. This monster spun and landed on the ground with a loud thud. The enemies that could fly had to be dealt with first. The king hunters on the ground could only be delayed by manpower, waiting for the particle cannon to recharge. The army mobilized the troops in front of the king hunter. There were more than 1,000 people, but this number was not necessarily enough. Endless bullets rained down, but they were all deflected by the scales of the king hunter. Sparks flew everywhere. The king hunter was getting faster and faster, and no attack could stop its momentum. Everyone could foresee the outcome if it crashed into the steel defense line at this speed. A bloody path would be plowed through the defense team, and they would lose at least 2 teams. None of the soldiers wavered. They obeyed the orders without hesitation. Just as the 2 sides were about to collide, boom, dust suddenly flew up, and the seemingly unstoppable king hunter beast actually stopped. It opened its bloody mouth wide and bit on a long gray metal cube that looked like a ruler. An armored warrior was holding onto the cube, and both sides were competing with each other in terms of strength. They were evenly matched. It was this armored warrior that blocked the king hunter, leaving only a majestic back view for all the soldiers. Everyone opened their eyes wide, wanting to see who this intruder was. However, he was wearing a helmet, so they could not see his face at all. This armor was a little shabby, like a tight suit with a few pieces of armor embedded in it. The color was dark. Seeing this, Han Zhao's lips curled up slightly. The intruder was Herluz. "You really came?" Han Technician smiled. "Let me see if you're strong enough at this time." The king hunter seemed to have sensed danger. It dodged to the side and roamed vigilantly. The defense team was about to surround it when Herluz suddenly said, "Leave this beast to me. You guys go somewhere else." "Leave it to you? Who are you? What if you fail?" The troops naturally did not dare to trust him so easily. However, before they could continue to move, they saw a strong pugilist flame burst out of this armored warrior's body. Then, a change that shocked all the Sunils happened. The shabby combat suit on Herluz suddenly changed shape. A few compressed pieces of armor opened up and turned into countless precise structures and armor. As the light flashed, the tight suit quickly turned into a set of extremely precise silver-blue armor, like a set of gorgeous ancient knight armor. A piece of pure white, soft metal appeared on each of his shoulders and hung behind him like a cape. Even with Han Technician's extremely picky aesthetic, this design was very cool. Energy surrounded the armor on his body. Herluz swung the rectangular piece in his hand, which expanded and turned into a mechanical battleship cutting blade that was almost 10 meters long in the blink of an eye. All the Sunils were shocked. The name that was buried in their memories suddenly appeared. Countless soldiers opened their eyes wide and exclaimed in shock. "This performance is Commander-class armor? The legendary race's strongest armor that has been lost." All the soldiers were shocked. Their minds went blank. The commander-class armor was an unattainable legend to the current Sunils, and a legend had truly appeared today. Haluz twisted his neck. Strong pugilist energy flowed throughout his body, and his dormant battle genes slowly awakened. This custom-made armor was working well, and it was in excellent condition. He chuckled. I've almost forgotten this feeling. This feeling is not bad. With a roar, Haluz waved the 10-meter-long battleship-cutting blade and pounced forward. He was as fast as a phantom, and a thick blade flashed like a fountain. Swoosh! The blade slashed out a silver wave, creating a trench that was dozens of meters long. The King Hunter dodged it by a hair's breadth. A bloody wound appeared on its slender body, and the wound quickly expanded. Blood spurted out. The roles of hunter and prey switched instantly. NT, you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.